Johnny said that's what I said. Were you prepared for that? Almost. It was basically the stuff that you wrote up earlier.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me open a regular meeting of the City Council of City of Pearland for Monday, August the 27th, 2018. It's hard to believe it's already August and almost the end of the year. Moving in our agenda to item number 1 is call to order, which I just did. Item number 2, and I'm using the same agenda that you have, invocation and pledge of allegiance of the American. If you'll please rise, we'll have an invocation tonight, and Dr. Chris O'Leah, our Parks Department, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Lord, we're always grateful for the opportunity to come together in the service of our kingdom and of our fellow citizens. We're grateful for the things that you have worked with us over the years to achieve, and we have felt the benefits of your activities and your grace and that you have given us as we have grown as a city and as individuals. Lord, we know that you are awfully busy, but we ask that you watch over our citizens, our military personnel overseas. May they return home safe and soon. And I know that there is an individual that will be joining you soon, Lord, is senator in our nation and a former naval aviator, had served in wartime and was grievously injured. We ask that you receive him with honor and watch over him and get him organized. As a former Navy guy, he probably needs your help. Lord, we ask that you be with us throughout the meeting today, the opportunities that we have to work with our citizens and the opportunities that we have for the reaching out and watching the citizens and our communities grow and develop as we always have been in the past and of which we shall always do in the future. And as we go through the process tonight, Lord, we ask that you be with us on our trips to our home and keep us safe and sound. For we ask this in your name, for your sake, Lord. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Moving in our agenda to item number 3, which is roll call, and our council is here with the exception of Councilmember Reed, who I understand will be joining us shortly. Moving up to item number 4, we have citizen comments, and I'll ask Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Perez, address that issue.
Mayor, we've not received any public comment for general comment. We have several for particular items, and we'll call those individuals up to speak on those items. But no speakers for general items, sir.
Did you, perchance, have a citizen that wanted to speak on the citizen to be heard this morning? Okay, I don't think we have any. Okay. Moving in our agenda to item number 5 on our collective agendas, which is public hearing. Public hearing for curfew ordinance, and I'll ask staff to give our city attorney to give us a definition of what our process will be.
Yes, Mayor. The city has a curfew ordinance. It has been in effect over the last 20 years, and state law that enables that ordinance also requires that the city council, on an annual basis every 3 years, conduct a public hearing regarding the need and necessity for continuing to to enforce a curfew ordinance in the city. The purpose of the public hearing tonight is to do so, and Ron Frazier from the Pearland Police Department will be here to present a few items before receiving public comment.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Our curfew ordinance was adopted, like Mr. Coker said, about 20 years ago. It was adopted in response to an increase in gang activity that we were seeing at the time. Generally, an encounter with a juvenile out after curfew results in a call to the juvenile's parent and a rapid return home. Very seldomly result in a citation. Frequently, the parent's unaware of the juvenile's location or the people that the juvenile might be with. During school hours, we have curfew. During school, we have curfew hours. If the child is found out and he's supposed to be attending school, he's either returned to school or taken home. The encounter makes the parents more aware of the juvenile's activities. This awareness has allowed parents to be more proactive in addressing potential problems. The ordinance itself gives police officers sufficient reason to engage with juveniles, in this case under the age of 16, during either early morning hours, after midnight, or during school hours, where the officer may have no other legal basis for the encounter. If it's a consensual encounter, then an individual's not obliged to provide a name or any other information to an officer who encounters them. Where there's a violation of the law, there's an obligation to do so. In the early morning hours, they're a target for offenses like car burglaries, and it gives officers reason to encounter individuals walking on the roadway. We're able to follow up with that information later to determine whether or not these individuals were involved with a crime. During school hours, the offense of choice is generally daytime house burglaries. Again, gives us an opportunity to engage with these people on that we find in the area. Parents have not historically been charged. That portion of the statute is important because we do get self-compliance. Parents are saying, will tell their children, we need you to abide by the law. Parents do have a couple of defenses. If they're accompanying the juvenile, they can be out as late as they want, of course, and they are allowed to send the juvenile on an errand, and one that can be completed directly coming to or from. There are allowances made for school functions, church functions, and work activities as well. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any question or comment from council at this point? What do we move to the next item on our agenda, which is citizen to be heard? Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem will handle this item.
Any member of the audience that'd like to speak in regards to this public hearing? Is there any member of the audience who would like to make a public comment in regards to this public hearing? Third and final time, is there any member of the audience that would like to make public comment with regards to this public hearing? Hearing none, Mayor, I think we can move forward.
Good. Looking at my agenda, the next item says adjourn. And unless the council has any question or comment at this point? Any question, comment at this point from council? And I'll move down to adjourn, which I shall so do. As we move then to item number 6 on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. And I'll ask Councilmember Carbone if he will present the consent agenda for our consideration. It'll be items A through N.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'd like to remove item L.
Did you, I'm sorry?
I'd like to remove item L.
L as in love, okay, L, all right.
Consideration
Any other item
possible.
to be removed? Okay.
Consideration and possible action approval of consent agenda items A through N with the exclusion of L. So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Any comments from council? Question or comment? Hearing none. We have none. Mr. Secretary, we have motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Aye. Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Moving to new business item L. Would you present that for our consideration, Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action resolution R 2018-151. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Any question or comment from council? Hearing none, we staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good evening. This item is something that we've been working on to try to make more manageable and streamline the process. We're very pleased that from time to time, various groups want to have fun runs or walks or activities in town, making use of public roads. Up to now, we've kind of had to invent and go over those with each of the particular specific organizers of that event. There's other cities that we found that have a couple of different routes that are sort of prepackaged and at the ready that have been vetted by staff in terms of police, fire, public works. And so then the organizers can choose from one of those and have their event. So this is to formalize that and to get those into place. So then that, I think there's a couple of different options for links of the activities, and just makes it much easier, we believe, for both the organizers and for the city administratively to handle those when those come in. So recommend your consideration and the affirmative for that.
Does council have any question or comment on this item? Councilman Carbone.
Thank you, Mayor. So on a couple of these, or I guess specifically the half marathon, what are we doing in terms of traffic control, specifically on Bailey and Magnolia? Are these set up where we'll still have at least a lane of travel east and west?
I think Mr. Brands will be able to talk to those specifics for you.
Pardon me. In what the current plan is, based on the route that you have there, we would close down one lane of traffic, and essentially they would only be able to go, I believe the plan in this particular case is go west. They would not be able to go east on Bailey Road in this particular case.
Okay, are we approving that, or are we just approving these
We're
maps?
approving all of the existing race routes, and it's specifically the routes themselves. The logistics and the issues can be that they'll still have to go through the special event process, but in essence, what we're doing is just approving the route. The details can still be worked out, and once we receive the plan from the host of the event, then we can work with them on the details.
Okay. All right, I guess I just wanted to make sure, I mean, we're essentially circling several neighborhoods. I just wanted to make sure that we were prepared for ingress and egress, and I guess not locking anything down right now, and just giving all the flexibility to be as least inconvenient for those residents.
There was a lot of discussion about that specifically, and we do realize, especially in an event like this, a half marathon, if you're putting on an event like this that's going to attract potentially thousands of people to Pearland, there would be some logistical issues from time to time. But what this is doing is just specifically identifying that route itself among the other routes that we have included in the packet too.
All right, thank you.
Council have another question regarding that item?
Just a follow-up. So we're essentially pre-approving routes. If somebody wants to do a half marathon, they come and say, we want to do a half marathon in Pearland. We tell them, here's our half marathon route, pre-vetted, and allow them to select that.
That's correct.
If, in theory, if they were not interested in having a half marathon in the southeast corner of Pearland, would we give them another option, or would we just tell them it's not something that Pearland would be interested in?
Not at this time, no. We would not be interested in that other route. We might consider it after this 5-year time period because we're approving these routes for a 5-year time period, but initially this would be the option for a half marathon.
Okay, so they come in, they have an event, we give them, here's your options, pick one of the options. Those are your only options.
That is correct. And these routes are also certified so that they could be utilized for other qualifying events.
I did notice in the packet, we stated that they were responsible for their own traffic control plan. Do we give them an option, or is there a requirement they use Pearland PD as part of their traffic control, or do we allow them to select their own plan if they have their own volunteers?
The vast majority of time, it will be Pearland PD, but in the event, let's say we do a half marathon and there's not enough available officers, then our police department has the ability to work with other agencies that they would work with for that particular event.
Thank you, Jay.
Any other comment from council?
I've just got one, Mayor and John. Do we have anybody scheduled right now for Magnolia? Or do you know?
Could you repeat that question? I'm not sure.
I said, do we have anybody scheduled to do that? And you were talking about, closing down the westbound, or the eastbound, I guess it would be. Do we have anybody that's scheduled to do that this year?
We have an applicant that is looking at a race next spring. Nothing in this current year.
Yeah, because I just wondering, with the frontage road going in on from 59 on down to 518, and that construction in there, and then the closure of 518 at 288 for the overpass, that people are not going to have much way to get over to the west side. So.
We only have one potential event that's referenced in the other agenda item on the consent, which is potentially a February or March event.
Yeah, because it looks like that the construction, I guess, on the frontage road over there from 59 down to 518, and then the work on the overpass part there on 288 for the Beltway, that's in 19, so.
That would be taken into consideration. So the permit would come through, we'd evaluate it, we'd receive their plan, we'd look at the schedules that are out there regarding projects throughout the community, and then ultimately approve or deny based on all of those factors.
Okay. Yeah, that was the only concern of people using 518 or Magnolia trying to travel through there, so, okay.
That's great. I appreciate that. Any other question or comment, council? I think we have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Aye. Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Moving in our agenda to item number 8, which is new business. Item number 1, Councilmember Reed, would you present this for our consideration?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action first reading of ordinance number 1012-3. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Yes, Mayor, this is the ordinance that accompanies the public hearing that the council just conducted regarding the curfew ordinance. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions if the council has any.
Okay. Council have any questions at this point?
Mayor, just one point of clarification. I think in the public hearing, it was stated this is for individuals 16 or younger, but it's for 17 and under. Is that correct?
Yes, minors are defined in the ordinance as under 17.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question or comment?
I have a question on the penalties. What it says that upon conviction shall be fined amount not to exceed $500. What typically is? I mean, we've only had three citations. Does a citation automatically come with 500? Because that seems kind of excessive. Or I mean, do we have discretion? But I mean, what triggers what amount? I'm just curious.
Actually, that is it's a default provision in our city code of ordinances. There are some certain sections of our city ordinance that have higher fines, but the lowest is 500. But that is actually the maximum fine for that offense. What happens is once a citation has been issued and it's gone to court, there will actually be a fine determined based on court costs and what that fine would be. If they went to trial, it could be up to $500, but it would not necessarily be $500. So, and also, it's also used as a tool when a defendant meets with a prosecutor. Those amounts can usually be pleaded down to a lesser amount, and that is usually the case.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't something that, I mean, it just seems like a lot to punch somebody with, kind of a first offense thing. So thank you for the clarification.
Any other question? Any other question from council? Hearing none, we do have motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
Councilmember Little. Councilmember Moore.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone.
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Moving in our agenda to item number 2, Councilmember Perez, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, resolution number R 2018-160. So moved.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have two separate items, but the same kind of idea. I think it'd be helpful if we ask Mr. Hardy's got a brief presentation just to get us all on the same page and understand some of the basic facts, and then maybe you want to entertain some comments. But Joel, if you could share your presentation, please.
Thank you, Clay. Mayor and Council, for information purposes tonight, we'd like to present this item to you and the public regarding the establishment formation of Emergency Service District Number 4.
Before we present our case, I'd like for the council, one of the individuals who have requested permission to speak.
Apologies, Joel. We're going to go ahead and let the individuals that wanted to speak on this item go ahead and speak before the presentation. I have 3 individuals that have requested to speak on this item particularly.
One at a time.
The first one is Mr. Jeff Brennan. If you'll give your name and address for the purpose of the record, you have 3 minutes to speak. I'll let you know when 30 seconds is left.
Hopefully it won't take that long. Council, thank you very much for the time. My name is Jeff Brennan. I reside at 16930 County Road 127, Pearland. I've been involved in this ESD formation with the help of Missouri County Commissioners Court, who has asked this ESD to be formed. We have taken steps to get the petition signed by the number of people that live in the area for this. We have presented this to Missouri County and it has been approved for the formation of ESD4. I now understand it's up to council to allow this formation to be within their extraterritorial jurisdiction, and I encourage you to do so. I believe all the questions have been answered by not only our commissioner, but Stacey Adams, but Ryan Cade, who is also representing another ESD, and the other commissioners on the court. If there's any other questions that need to be answered regarding this ESD, I believe the Commissioners Court has followed the state law in the formation. And again, I ask you for this ESD to be formed. It'll be beneficial to the area within the extraterritorial jurisdiction for services to be provided by whoever this ESD goes with. Thank you very much.
Hey, Mayor. I'd like to hear the presentation first before we do the people to talk.
Well,
Because there'll probably be some things that they may understand on there that may satisfied or whatever.
I thought that we should hear the citizens' comments first, and which we're doing. Excellent.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, Mr. Bill Brummett.
Good evening, Council. My name is Bill Brummett. Y'all might remember me from the annexation process. I helped to represent Area P, which y'all graciously decided not to annex us. But in the time whenever, Bill Brummett, 3441 County Road 89, Pearland 77584.
Thank you.
So when I was talking with folks out in our neighborhood about annexation, one of the things that I asked them was, well, what would you think about kicking in something to Pearland? Because it did seem fair to me at the time, but I didn't know that an ESD is how that would work out. I think it's a very fair process. I think it's close as we can get to a win-win for the citizens and for the city. I think that y'all explained how much money you're spending on fire and ambulance out to this portion of the ETJ, and for us to put up a good portion of that money back to you, it seems fair. So like Jeff would say, I would encourage you to include this proposition for ESD4. I hope that it goes to the ballot in November. I hope that I get to go out and talk to the citizens in my area especially, and encourage them to go out and vote for the process and help explain it to them if they need it, some explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Last individual that wants to speak on this item is Diane Leverton. And if you'll give us your name and address for the purpose of the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. I'll let you know when you got about 30 seconds left.
My name is Diane Leverton. I live at 2310 Buckholt Street, Pearland 77581. First of all, I'd like to thank Councilman Owens for requesting that we get the presentation first. I don't think I've ever attended a city council meeting where we didn't have the presentation and then the people speak. And I think sometimes those presentations are very helpful to the residents. I am opposed to the creation of ESD4, and I'm opposed to it because of its fragmented land segments and the boundaries. ESD4 looks like it will be comprised of 9 small sections of land scattered from the far east side of Pearland ETJ to Rocheron. To travel from the east end of proposed ESD4 to the west end is a 32-minute drive, which could make it almost impossible for this ESD to contract services with the entity that will be the most benefit to all these segments of land. My biggest concern is that ESD4 has the potential to become the mess that ESD3 is right now. As you know, our state representative has had to get involved with that ESD, and there is a grassroots petition that currently has 541 signatures to force the entire ESD3 board to resign. ESD3 has many segments of property just like ESD4 will. From what I found online, ESD2 has also had issues, and I don't know if those are resolved yet, and I didn't have time to research those. ESD4 needs to be broken up into smaller ESDs based on more localized land parcels. The benefit of an ESD to the residents is that it can contract with the provider that provides the best service at the best price. Since an ESD is a permanent entity, the ESD needs to be geographically defined such that it can truly partner with the best service provider, and location is a very significant factor. ESDs remain in effect even if an area is annexed by the city. City taxes would just be added to the tax bill when annexation occurs. ESDs are powerful entities whose board members can set a tax rate as high as 10 cents per $100 value, raise sales taxes by up to 2%, and issue debt. ESD3 is already at the maximum tax rate, has tried to implement a 0.5% sales tax, and has issued bonds. A staff member of ESD3 told me last week that a new fire station costs approximately $4 million. The ESD board members, which are not elected by voters but are appointed by the county commissioners
You have
court,
30 seconds.
would have the authority to issue debt. I don't see a path for the residents of the ESD to ensure that board members are selected from across the entire ESD. If all board members come from the east side of Pearland, that's not fair to the people out in Roche Sharon and vice versa. I've also heard that somebody has told others that the board members of the new ESD have already been identified, and that really concerns me. If you want to learn more about ESD 3, there's a meeting in Danbury tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. That completes the reporters. Now we have staff report.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We just want to cover a couple of important points related to the formation and establishment of emergency service districts. They are, of course, governed by Chapter 775 of the Texas Health and Safety Code. They are an additional governmental jurisdiction designed to support or provide local emergency services in the areas of fire protection, emergency medical services, and they may impose property and or sales tax to support those costs. And they are also allowed to own or purchase equipment, build facilities, and employ personnel and things like that. There is a constitutional cap the state imposes on an ESD, and that would be the 10 cent of the $100 appraised value in the state of Texas. And this action stems from council's action in March, where you passed Resolution 2018-59 on the 26th of March, directing that resolution that the city would end service to the ETJ for areas that did not have contracts in place to do so. And that would exclude areas, specifically MUD 6, 16, 21, and 22, as those entities do have agreements in place with the city that provide those services. The petition and request requirements are, again, statutorily required. This group established their petition and request, submitted it to Brazoria County on the 18th of July. They submitted a request to the city in accordance with those statutory requirements on July the 23rd, and have also gone through the required public hearing and concurrence process that the county requires on August the 14th of 2018, where Brazoria County Commissioners Court approved that request. And tonight's action would be consideration and possible action on the city's portion of responsibility to act on the measure. The petition and the request proposed for the proposed territory that are certain areas south of Pearland and the city's ETJ, comprised of approximately 6,400 acres, mostly along east and west of the southern edge of the area, and would include approximately 4,600 parcels of land. This is a map of the proposed emergency service district. The red hatched areas do indicate the areas that belong to that territory. For discussion's sake, we did want to point out a couple of important pieces of information. There is an estimated portion of fire EMS expenditures for these areas that total about $1.4 million of the city's estimated $16 million in net costs. The revenue that could be created from a 10 cent per $100 appraised values will come to about $851,000. And this territory is unserved by any other emergency service district, and there are no other proposed overlapping jurisdictions in place, and no other special purpose districts such as MUDs or PUDs or anything like that. If consent is given by council tonight, the next steps would involve the Brazoria County Commissioners Court calling for a November election. The voters from those proposed territory would cast ballots in favor or against that measure, and the county judge, if voted in favor, would order the formation of the ESD and appoint the 5-member board. Those appointments take place in the shape of 3 members being appointed for a 2-year term, and 2 would be appointed for a 1-year term. So there's some staggering, and annually on January the 1st, the County Commissioners Court would also present successors for that board. In addition, the service district, once formed, would have to go through the traditional organizational development steps that take place with any governing jurisdiction. They, of course, have to meet. There are certain management activities that require legal counsel to be involved in the financial management activities of the ESD. They would have to develop a budget, their tax rate, and, of course, determine how they would contractually or through some other mechanism secure fire and EMS services. And finally, of course, tax bills come out in October of the following year, and revenue from those tax bills would be created through the payments made by January 31st in 2020. So the revenue from those created ESDs would not come into play until the year 2020 fiscal year. But one important point to note is that once formed, the ESD can add territory to an unincorporated area without consent. If council so chooses to deny this action tonight, there would not be a November ballot. It would require the group to go back and get a new petition that would be due 90 days from the original request. And it would have to be comprised of a majority of the qualified voters from the area, as well as 50% of the property owners in the proposed territory. And if, once presented, council failed to act on that within 6 months, it would be considered consent by default. And finally, staff recommendation for this item is council consideration and approval. And I'll pass back the balance to council.
With the completion of the staff report, does Clay, do you and senior staff have any further comment for wrap-up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Mr. Hardy's presentation sort of laid it out, and we also gave you quite a bit of background information in the AR and the attachments. So we do believe that this formation of an ESD fulfills, for this case, the directive of the council, and recommend your positive consideration.
Okay. As I go through the process of asking the city secretary to call the roll, the answer would be either yes or no, right? For clarification. Either in favor of or in opposition to. So it would be either yes in favor of, no in opposition to. Is that correct? I just want to get a call. I want to get a signal right here. Okay. Council, have any further questions before I go forward in the process? We have a motion.
We have a council discussion. I think each of the council members want to speak on this item. Mayor.
Okay. Council, have any question or comment at this point?
Thank you, Mayor. If I'm understanding this correctly, the cost is about 1.4 million estimated per year, provide services to ESD4.
Yes, sir. And I need to qualify that. We need to have some estimate. It costs us to provide that level of service. But that's our methodology. You know, it's a very good estimate, and an order of magnitude is how I describe it. I wouldn't say it's to the penny. The fact is that when you have a fire and EMS service, it's available for anybody in that service area. And so there's a high premium for us to have the capacity to be able to answer the call. And you know, whether you have one call or you have 5 calls, we still have that service available. So I wouldn't want us all to get too hung up on that exact number, but I think it's a very fair sort of representation of what is proportional to the total cost for the city.
Okay, and according to the staff's report, the tax revenue generated is around $851,000. So the city would absorb the $449,000 shortfall.
Right, but the fact is too, we're absorbing 100% of that right now. We're not getting anything back, and the 10 cents is the maximum that ESD could levy. So it'd be very, strong in terms of, covering that sort of proportional amount.
Thank you.
Also, of that 851,000 proposed or projected revenue that would be created, I was looking through here, and some of these maybe have administrative costs for the ESDs. Would those come out of that 851,000 that they would pay out to?
Yeah, good point. There's nothing that guarantees that, if they levied at 10 cents and it came out to 851, An ESD's got administrative overhead, as you referenced. They have attorneys, I don't know what other kinds of advisors, financial. Some ESDs have staff. I don't know that that'd be required, but they could hire people, and so that would all cut into that amount. So each ESD would have its own structure and overhead costs that would eliminate at least some of the money that could be paid for the actual service.
So theoretically, they could have $150,000 in staff expenses, and that would come out of the 851, so our gap would be even larger.
Yeah, good point, yes, theoretically.
Okay, and do we have any, for the people that live in this area, is there any way that we could potentially project maybe how much they're generating? Because I see the only way to make up that gap would maybe be through sales tax if they're coming into the city and shopping and eating and things like that. Do we have any reasonable estimation of what?
Yeah, that'd be nearly impossible. I mean, just depending on where they go and what they're doing and so forth, so,
Okay. Yeah. All right.
I think we need to clarify that we're not talking at this point who does the service or what kind of service you get. It's whether we will agree to your forming the district at this point. And you'll come back later for the selection of your service provider.
If I'm correct, and sorry, Mayor, Darren, we're voting on whether or not they can go, that this goes to election in November, right?
Yes, in order to have an election, they have to have the consent of the city since it's in our ETJ.
So we're not
No
voting on
decision.
the formation, the actual formation. Obviously,
That's
the
correct.
end result would be the formation if the voters voted for it.
That is correct. We're only voting on consent this evening, and that consent affords them the opportunity to take it to the voters in November.
Thank you.
One more thing, if we consent to the creation of the ESD and the voters vote to create one, they're not obligated to contract with the city, are they?
correct. They would, their board would have that discretion, and that's what we laid out, but they, they did have some options at least. The service has been provided by Pearland to this point, but when there's new ESD, then they could go and decide who they wanted to pay that to.
Any further counsel by counsel?
Councilman Carbone, go ahead.
Council Carbone?
No, I was just, the same thing, I was gonna clarify, this, we're not approving this and automatically we can budget 851 or net of fees. This is, so an ESD can be created and then that's its own separate governing body with its own separate board. And if they want to negotiate with the city for some level of service, they can, but they can go do whatever they want. So, I mean, I know it's easy to say, hey, we've got this gap, we think it's gonna fund it, but this is purely allowing the entity to be created, to be voted on to be created.
And just for clarification purposes, more so for the audience, I know the answer, but they still have to come back to us to negotiate terms. The board, after being formed, would have to go back and negotiate terms to whether or not it would be, all the way up to that 10 cents. And but obviously, there's going to be a gap, and so there's going to be some other things that would cover the gap. Specifically, the young lady that got up and spoke about ESD3 and what's going on with ESD3, you're exactly right. It's a huge mess. A lot of that, though, has to do with the board and their performance. This is pretty spread out, but for all intents and purposes, this is a very small ESD. Both of these formations tonight are very small ESDs, and technically, from a legal standpoint, they should be just one ESD. It makes more sense, for them to be one ESD, maybe one cover EMS and the other fire, but neither here nor there. What's been done has been done, and so I don't see anything wrong with the voters deciding, but I do hope that you all as voters become more educated about what an ESD is, what the end result could be. Look into ESD3 like, I'm sorry, I forget your name, but like the young lady said that got up here to speak a little bit earlier, and fully understand it, not just come to, because somebody told you to come and fight for ESD 5 or 4 to be passed, or for you to have the right to go to the polls and vote for it, but actually fully understand what it is that an ESD accomplishes. Obviously, it accomplishes a lot, but it also puts more debt onto you as the citizen. And so your MUD attorneys can tell you a lot of stuff. Whoever can tell you whatever they want you to hear, but just make sure you research it yourself. That's all I want to say.
So I have a question on this. So the board members are appointed by the county commissioner's court. But what is the process of removing one of those board members if they're appointed? Is there contracts, or, I mean, how does that work?
I don't know the specific answer to that question other than say that I would assume that they serve at the pleasure of the Commissioner's Court, but there may be some specific criteria they have to consider before removal from office.
Okay. So, as much as I hate to create another government entity or another layer of government, I feel that this should go out to a vote of the voters. They should have the opportunity to vote on this, whether they want to do this or not. So I'll be in favor of this tonight, but I would say that if you do not want to see your ESD, if that's what ends up happening in your area, like ESD3, then, you should hold people accountable. Be like Councilmember Reed said, be involved, know who to contact, and hold them accountable. They should serve at your pleasure, not the other way around.
So I think it's important for a lot of people that are here that we talk a little bit about the history of this, and I'll try and go through it as briefly as we can. The reason we're here is because the state law changed the annexation rules. We attempted to annex areas where we had on our future plans. Those areas had representatives that sued on y'all's behalf. I doubt that they got a petition from y'all before they did this. And when they sued, they made it very clear that Pearland had no services that they wanted, to include fire and EMS. Our plan for the past 20 years, 25 years, has been to extend service to y'all at no cost, with the understanding that we would eventually annex most, if not all, of these areas, and at that point, y'all would pay. You would pay city taxes, which include the fire and EMS service. I have talked to a number of cities and ESDs. None of them have done this. None of them have extended service beyond their city boundaries. No ESD extends service beyond their ESD boundaries. It was a benefit that we were offering on the promise that we were eventually going to annex. When it was clear that the court was not going to side on our behalf, that the annexation would not move through, we discussed on the benefit of the City of Pearland taxpayers that we cannot continue to lose money in an area that will never contribute, and has fought vigorously, or had representatives fight on their behalf vigorously, to ensure that they would never contribute. What we offered was, that's our tool. That's the only tool that the City of Pearland has, is annexation. We cannot commission ESD formation. We cannot require that y'all do this. But we did say we'll leave it to the citizens who live in our ETJ to come up with a solution to how they can contribute to at least pay some portion. We know, as you can see from the max calculation, if y'all form the ESD and y'all agree to have the 10-cent tax and y'all agree to pay the entire 10-cent tax to us, all of which ifs, we still don't make up the entire difference. It means the City of Pearland is still subsidizing fire service to y'all. This is why we are where we are. If without an ESD, there really is no other option. But I do feel, it's necessary for us to have as simple an option as we can for the benefit of the citizens of the City of Pearland. If we're managing multiple districts, as was suggested, each district has its own board. Each board makes its own decisions. Each decisions can be in contradiction to the others. They can vote on different tax rates. One can be more demanding than others. And we're seeing that a little bit with some of the areas where we have partnerships in our ETJ, particularly Lakes of Savannah, where we had an agreement for fire service. And at this point, they're unhappy with their fire service, and they want what they believe to be a more equitable service. And not to discuss the fine points of that, but if with more ESDs, the more opportunity we have to have those discussions, each ESD wanting what they believe to be more equitable service. What I suspect is that if we had multiple ESDs, each one of them would say, well, I want a fire station within our boundaries. And I think that the city of Pearland, since we pay y'all, should build a fire station within our boundaries, but we just couldn't afford that to do that. So that's why I think a fragmented ESD is just not going to be a good solution. What we're trying to do is just create something where we can levy. We'd hope to do is be able to create an entity that can generate some revenues to offset the cost for us to continue to serve you. That's the hope and the idea here. Because I don't want to be able to have a fire station have to stop at the city limits, but ultimately, without a contribution, I can't explain that to the citizens of Pearland and their taxpayer dollars. We go through budgets every year and they say, where can you cut? Why aren't you cutting? And we tell them, well, there's nothing. There's this. This is what we can cut. And this is what we're exploring. I do believe that, I'll be in favor of the formation of ESD4. And I do think that it's important that those who live in ESD4 really think through how you get other people, if you want this formed, how you get other people to make sure you vote. Because if you do not vote for it, and if it fails, then we have no tools left. We will the service will end at the end of the year, and unfortunately, we'll have difficulty finding a way to continue to provide service to you. I think it's also important to note that if the vote passes, the next year we're going to provide service to you. We're not going to get any revenue. We're going to continue to service as we did before on the promise that you will eventually pay. So I think the history is important for all of those who don't follow City of Pearland governance on a day-to-day basis. It's important to y'all to know that as y'all are here, y'all are passionate. That's what we're trying to accomplish. It would, if I were to write a solution for this, this would not be the solution that we would come up with. The annexation was the best solution. that got pulled out from underneath us. That we're trying to put together something to where y'all, if y'all call 911, y'all got something coming. So again, I'll be in favor of formation of 4. Y'all have to do your part, and hopefully we can get on the other end of this.
Just to make clarification, I'm probably jumping ahead of myself a little bit here, but now that we have the map up, can we show what ESD4 would consist of? Would it be this complete entire area that's red checked?
Yes, sir. All of the red hatched areas would be what the territory would be comprised of. Yes, sir.
That's ESD4.
ESD4 only.
Okay.
Any other question for council?
I just want to ask one question on there. Is people that sit on the board or will be sitting on the board, are they residents of those areas? Or how does that?
Yes, they must be residents of the territory being covered by the ESD.
I wanted to echo what Councilmember Perez said, in that I think looking at this, trying to make a decision, I will vote for it, but trying to remember that my primary responsibility is to protect the Pearland taxpayers, and knowing that we're giving the option to create this with a vote. And if it goes through, looking at the revenue and the gap, and thinking if there are any administrative costs, knowing that the Pearland citizens would have to subsidize this to, potentially $550, maybe even $700,000 per year, just seems like a lot. But obviously, it's a difficult decision. You obviously don't want anybody to be without access to these services. I think that's important. So just, anytime you go out to shop or eat or anything, just please make sure you do it within the City of Pearland city limits so we can get some of that sales tax money. Thank you.
That's for sure.
One other question, just to clarify. You stated, Mr. Hardy, in there that they could add territory without consent. Without consent of who?
Yes, so the board can vote within itself to add territory to the ESD as long as it is part of the unincorporated area of the region. So they can't add territory that's in our city limits. And of course, if they were to incorporate another jurisdiction, they'd have to get consent from them.
But I think the other piece, that there'd still be a vote, so, of the people in any additional areas. So they'd have to elect to do that, they just wouldn't have to come to us to ask for permission to have that vote in our unincorporated area.
One other point of clarification, just to address something that was brought up in public comment. If there was an area that was in this ESD, if the ESD is formed and this area, it gets annexed by the city of Pearland, that area, that portion of the ESD no longer survives the annexation, correct?
It's a little bit different than, say, with a municipal utility district. With the concept there is that when you annex a municipal utility district, that MUD is then dissolved and you absorb the MUD's debt at that time. It's a little bit different with an ESD. Actually, when you annex an area or a portion of an ESD, they both do coexist. The city has the discretion at that time. If we want to dissolve the portion that's in the annexed area, we would have the ability to do so, but we would have to also take on the pro rata share of the debt for that area.
And just to amplify, that'd be fully the expectation, is that if we annex areas of an ESD, that I don't know why there'd be a situation where we wouldn't dissolve it for that area, that there wouldn't be overlapping, because they'd be getting our services at that point.
And in theory, if they formed and they had our services, there would be no need for them to take on debt because we would provide them all their services, correct?
Well, I mean, it's not so much a question of having the services, it's you'd take on debt to construct buildings and do that kind of thing. So under this scenario, that's one of the reasons that, when we're looking at this new ESD for just our ETJ, they could contract for the service. We're already here, we're already doing it. There wouldn't be need for an ESD to build a big infrastructure or anything else like that, because we're already here doing it. That makes sense?
Good.
It does make sense. If they decided that they would provide their own service and not contract with us, that overcomplicates
True.
things. And now that's a discussion for later, but that's at least addresses that one concern that was brought up in public comment.
If all of you are confused, not a one of us in this audience today, in this room, have gone through this process before. So it's sort of a learning curve for both of us. But it's a multi-step procedure. Stacey Adams and one of the other commissioners approached you and asked you if you would like to form a district. Yes, from the county standpoint, which they did. The county approved it. Now it's up to the city of Pearland to say, yeah, we agree that you need to form a district. It doesn't mean that we'll be the providers of the service necessarily. You're going to come back and find out later. But it does put you in step 2 now, so you're trying to get the city of Pearland to approve the crosshatch territory on the map up there as a district number 4, ESD district number 4. And then when you get that form, you're going to have to find somebody that wants to provide the service to you. It may not be Pearland. We may decide we don't want to do it. Or maybe somebody else, whatever. So we have to do this step by step. But tonight, our vote will be whether we approve you performing this district from the city standpoint, and then you can go to the next step. And I think there's a procedure, Joel, that they proceed, once we approve it or disapprove it tonight, they go to the next step.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor.
And then, so our action is call for a council vote in just a few minutes and see if we agree for your to form this district. Does council have any further comments at this point, or does staff have any wrap-up comments?
No other comments, sir. So it's just on the consent for ESD 4 alone.
This is for the ED4 only. Yeah, that's right. We have, council have any further comments on this? We do have a motion second on the floor from the council, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Little. Aye. Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
ESD district number 4. You're in business now for the next step. It's kind of like an all-American beauty contest, isn't it? Moving in our agenda to item number 3, Councilmember Hernandez, would you present this for our consideration?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, resolution number R2018-161. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We do have some citizens who wish to speak in this. I think there's look like several. Our Mayor Pro Tem will present this for our pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we call everybody up, I want just going to remind everybody, we have a 3-minute time limit on public speaking. I know some of y'all will be passionate and for good reason about this item, but we have a number of people who want to speak. So if you would please be respectful of the 3 minutes, it would be appreciated. So first, I'll call them up in the order which I received. First is a Florin Barson. Please come up. Sir, if you'll please give us your name and address for the purpose of the record. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when 30 seconds is up.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Council. My name is Florin Barsan. I reside at 2510 Lake Point Court in Pearland, Texas, 77584. I've been calling Pearland my home for 14 years now. Proud to be here, and I would like to, I'm one of the 200 petitioners that petitioned for formation of ESD number 5. I would like you to encourage to approve us to vote for the formation of ESD number 5 to benefit the people in MUD number 2 and 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, next, Mr. James L. Williams. Sir, if you'll please give us your name and address for the purpose of the record. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you get 30 seconds.
James Larry Williams II, 3914 Carywood Court, Pearland, Texas, 77584. Thank you, Council, for having us here tonight. Been a proud Pearland resident in MUD number 3 for 23 years. Strongly encourage the formation of ESD number 5. Got a lot of passionate stuff to say about that, but I know we got a lot of people to speak, and I'm hoping this will be an easy vote. I'm going to leave it short.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Brian Reagan, or Regan. Sir, if you would please give us your name and address for the purpose of the record. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when 30 seconds is left.
Good evening, City Councilman and Mayor. My name is Brian Reagan. My address is 3727 Abbeywood Drive in Pearland, Texas. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Texas. I just retired this year after a 37-year career. I have also lived in the proposed ESD number 5 boundaries for over 27 years. The reason for the ESD number 5 is to ensure taxation with representation. We want to pay the City of Pearland to provide us with fire and EMS service, but we want it to be our decision. We do not want someone else who might not live in our neighborhood making decisions for us. It was the city's idea to set up the ESD number 5, and we exceeded the number of signatures required to get this on the ballot. The County Commissioners Court approved this unanimously, and we have done everything that the city has asked us to do. Like I said, we want to pay our fair share of the costs for fire and EMS, and I'm willing to serve on this board. So please grant your consent for the creation of ESD number 5, just so it may be put on the ballot so the tax-paying residents can vote on whether or not they want this ESD number 5 as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, Dax Philbin. Sir, if you'll please give us your name and address for the purpose of the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
My name is Dax Philbin. I'm the attorney for Brazoria County MUDs 2 and 3, and I reside at 1347 West 24th in Houston, Texas. And good evening, Council and Mayor. I'm just going to give you a little history on this. The city notified the MUDs with a letter in March of 2018 that they would not be continuing to provide fire and emergency medical service to the extraterritorial jurisdictional residents of Pearland at the end of the year, December 31st, 2018. The city then followed up with a resolution passed by City Council stating that their official policy not to provide fire EMS to the ETJ residents of Pearland without a contract for such services by the end of the year. The city staff has attended our board meetings, MUDs 2 and 3, from March until the present, and they have asked us to negotiate in good faith with them and either contract with them directly for fire and EMS or join another existing ESD, such as ESD number 3, or create our own ESD. They have stated that they would work with us in good faith until such time as we could accomplish this. After careful consideration, we decided that it would be in the best interest of the residents of MUDs 2 and 3 living in the Pearland ETJ to form their own ESD and not participate in ESD 4, which contains all of the areas located in Pearland's ETJ. The reason for this decision is that our neighborhood brings the most taxable value to the ESD, and we want to be guaranteed that we have representation on the board of directors for the ESD. Without the creation of ESD 5, our residents would not be guaranteed any representation on the board, thus have no control over their tax dollars. Now that we have received approval from the County Commissioners Court to move forward with an election for the creation of ESD number 5 in November, the city staff is recommending not to give its consent to ESD number 5. The staff states that 1 ESD would be necessary and manageable, and 2 would not create return for the residents and citizens of Pearland. I would argue that if ESD number 5 is created and can generate $600,000 in tax revenue each year, there would be a great return for the city in contracting with ESD 5. There is absolutely no negative impact on the city with the creation of ESD 5 and ESD 4.
You have 30 seconds left.
Lastly, I would just like to say that this is not the time to play with the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. These are people's lives. We are asking the city to do the responsible and just thing, that is give its consent to the creation of ESD 5. Let's not deny someone fire and emergency medical service because you don't like the boundaries of their ESD. Thank you.
All right, next, Mr. Bob Felix. Mr. Felix, if you would please give us your name and address for the purpose of the record. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for allowing us to be here today. My name is Bob Felix. I live at 2814 Sable Drive, Pearland, Texas, 77584. I'm a Vietnam-era U.S. Navy veteran, and I'm also part of a commercial real estate LLC here in Brazoria County, as well as founder and current president of a nationwide transport company. I've been a resident in Pearland since 2005. I'm concerned about continuing the fire and the EMS service. I have to say that there was a day that I don't remember, but I ended up in the hospital, and thanks to the Pearland EMS, I'm here today. I was shocked to hear that the City of Pearland would not be providing fire and EMS service at the end of the year. I was shocked to hear that the City of Pearland staff has recommended against ESD number 5. Homeowners want to contribute and pay their fair share. Homeowners like myself want the creation of ESD 5 and to be on the board. I ask that our fire and emergency medical services continue to be provided as we work together in good faith. I ask for the city's support to create ESD number 5 and allow the voters to decide our own fate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My apologies if I mispronounced this one, but Lishan Jayeskara. My apologies, sir, if I've totally messed that up. If you can please give us the correct pronunciation to your name and address, And please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I will let you know when 30 seconds is left.
It's LaShawn Jayasekar, and I live at 3314 Ridgepoint Court, Pearland, Texas. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, former JAG officer, a practicing attorney, and a candidate for JP Precinct 2. But I'm not here to represent any of those things. I'm here to just convey a personal EMS story. You know, we were notified of the situation, and all of us in Silver Lake got together and energized our neighbors and friends, and we got the ballots and signatures needed. Less than a week later, I brought my father home from Memorial Hermann after a heart operation. Like all of us, I wished them good luck, have a nice day, and I went about my business. I didn't get even 5 minutes down the road to 288, and I got a panic call from my mom saying, "We hear sirens, they're getting closer, and they seem like they're outside our house." So like any of us, I turned around, went back, and I saw not less than 3 emergency ladder service trucks ringing our neighborhood, and all our neighbors out on the street engaged with the police trying to figure out what's going on. It turns out our immediate neighbor was having yard work done, and they punctured the gas line. So fortunately, Pearland responded, and we could have had a much different situation. So when I think about that, I don't know if I could leave an 83-year-old heart patient at home not knowing that he can pick up that phone and call 911 and have service. This, what we should be doing today is celebrating our local solution. Unlike the hot air blowing out of Austin and Washington, Pearland said, we're not going to provide services. We're going to have a new mechanism to fund this. Our local citizens came up with a local solution or a local issue. We ask that you please support that and put it on the ballot. Have it right on the ballot, just like my name's going to be on the ballot for JP. But let's give it to the citizens, right? Let's let them decide. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, Mr. Carl Bernard. Mr. Bernard, if you please give us your name and address for the purpose of the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
My name is Carl Bernard. I live at 3015 Gorham Court, Pearland, 77584. Mayor and council members, thank you very much for letting us speak today. I'm also director for MUD 3. Earlier this year, Pearland stated they would not provide emergency services at all past January 2019 if we don't start paying them. We understand that. Their suggested options were to either simply start paying them for a rate order at some unannounced rate. We'd been discussing rates, but nothing had ever been mentioned to us how much that would be, or that we start or join an ESD to pay for it. Of these options, MUDs 2 and 3 got together and chose to form ESD number 5, went out and got the signatures to get it on the ballot. This was approved to proceed to a vote in November by the Brazoria County Commissioners. This is a path that's supported by our residents and would provide the funding vehicle that Pearland is looking for. Our principal reason for wanting to form ESD number 5 is to have local control of how our taxes and water bill fees are spent. We're not looking for a free ride, and we ask the council consent to the creation of ESD number 5 so we can allow our residents to make their own decisions about this in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, Mr. Charles Everett. Hello, young man. How are you? If you could please give us your name and address for the purpose of the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds up.
My name is Charles Gavert. I live at 3502 Brandemere in Silver Lake in MUD 3. My wife and I have lived in that house for 19 years, and we've always had great things to say about the Pearland Fire and Emergency Services, as we've had quite a number of things over the years, hurricanes, fires, all those kind of things. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of of our neighborhood and our residents in Silver Lake who really, when you boil this all down, we just want to pay our fair price and have some representation. That's really what this all boils down to for us. And from what I understand, if we were lumped into ESD4, we wouldn't really have any representation. So that's really the key thing here. That's all we're really mostly concerned about. And so thank you for listening to me tonight, and have a good evening.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Gail Chevalier. Gail Chevalier. I'll put that at the back in case she happens to be out of the room for whatever reason. After that, we have Andy Weirich. You can please give us your name and address for the purpose of the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Andy Wyrick. I reside at 2927 Gorham Court, Pearland, Texas, 77584. On September 1st, 2006, my wife called me at work and said she could see smoke and flames from our back patio. In a fit of rage, a neighbor down the street from us had doused the interior of her home with gasoline and set it on fire. Within minutes, the entire house was engulfed in flames. Thanks to the quick response time and quick actions of the Pearland Fire Department, the fire was contained. There was minimal damage to the 2 adjacent homes. In the 15 years I've lived in Silver Lake, I've only heard positive things about the Pearland Fire Department and EMS. And I assumed we would continue to be served and protected by them for the foreseeable future. Fast forward to this past Friday. As I was reviewing the City Council meeting agenda online, I was encouraged to see the resolution of the City Council considering the creation of Brazoria County Emergency Service District Number 5. However, when I reviewed the associated report, I was shocked to see that the city administration was recommending to not concur to the creation of ESD5. How could this be? We collected more than the double necessary petition signatures we presented at the August 14th Commissioners Court meeting, where the formation of ESD5 was unanimously approved. If the formation of our own district was an administrative burden to the city, why wasn't it mentioned before now? After all, there have been representatives from the city at almost every single MUD board meeting since February 2017. At the Commissioners Court meeting, why didn't somebody from the city speak up and say, hey, servicing 2 districts is going to be difficult for us? Nothing was ever said. I am not so naive to believe that that's the real reason for being non-concurred. This is because we didn't stick to script and fall in with the rest of ESD4. The residents of Silver Lake chose to create their own district so that we would be guaranteed representation on the board. You asked for a rock, but you got back 2 rocks instead. Council members, I ask you, please rise above this pettiness. Whatever grudge, if there's a grudge here against us, please don't become part of it.
You have 30 seconds left.
Don't risk $614,000 in new tax revenue to make a point. And please don't play politics when it comes to residents' safety and well-being. I ask that you consent to the approval of VSD number 5. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Ms. Rose Tisdale. Ma'am, if you would please give us your name and address for the purpose of the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Good evening, Mayor Reed and council members. My name is Rose Tisdale. I live at 3231 Braesview Drive in Pearland, 77584. I'm here to represent ESD5 and to urge you to put it on the ballot so the residents have a vote and a say of how to best resolve this issue. We have informed everyone to the best of our ability and will continue to do so they know exactly what it is they're voting for. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, ma'am. One last time, in case she stepped out and came back in, Ms. Gail Chevalier. Happy to come back to join us, ma'am. Again, Ms. Gail Chevalier? She's gone home? Okay. Well, Mayor, that's the last of the speakers, and I pass it back to you, sir.
Okay. That completes the citizens' comments. Move to staff report.
Thank you, sir. Because this is a separate matter, we'll do a very similar presentation, probably abbreviate a little bit, but go through that, and then we'll have a couple other comments. But Mr. Hardy?
Put the map up too
Yep.
at some point.
Yep. He'll have that in there, sir.
Thank you, Clay. Yeah, we'll abridge this and probably skip the slides that have very similar information. But this item is associated with the proposal for Emergency Service District Number 5, and very similar purpose. Pardon me, sorry. Very similar to with ESD 4, MUDs 2 and 3 presented their petition to Brazoria County on July 18th. We immediately received a request of the city for that same purpose, and their public hearing and concurrence was conducted by Brazoria County on the same day, same agenda, August the 14th. And this, again, is for your consideration and possible action in the form of Resolution R 2018-161. The proposed territory are basically the municipal utility districts, MUDs 2 and 3, which total approximately 923 acres. About 2/3 of that is developed in the form of 2,100 parcels of land. This is a map of the proposed territory for ESD 5, and it is solely comprised of the boundaries of the MUDs 2 and 3 that exist in Pearland's ETJ. There are portions of it that, portions of the MUDs that exist in Manville's ETJ that are served by another emergency service district. For discussion's sake, we're going to point out that the estimated portion of fire EMS expenditures for this area, the cost share would be around $711,000. The estimated revenue that could be created from a 10-cent tax is around $614,000. The territory is unserved by any other ESD, and there's no proposed overlapping jurisdictions. Again, however, there are portions of MUDs 2 and 3 that are currently served by existing ESD 3. This is a map of that ESD 3 territory that covers the Manville portion of MUDs 2 and 3. And this chart is included in the agenda item that kind of gives a breakdown of the acreage and parcel percentages that are served by ESD 3 in comparison. As you can see, there's about number of parcels, 22%, and the acreages, ESD 3 covers about 18% of the total area. If approved, just like with ESD 4, the Brazoria County Commissioners Court would, through the county judge, order an election in November where the voters from the proposed territory would be able to cast their ballots in favor or against the motion. And the judge would then, and if a vote was cast in favor, would appoint the 5-member board, very similar again to ESD number 4. Again, same slide, same information about the additional steps that would take place upon the formation of the ESD. Same slide related to tax and revenue. A little bit of a different set of scenarios here. If there was no November ballot, and if this item was denied, of course, the new petition for services would be due 90 days from the original request. It would have to include the majority of qualified voters, 50% of the property owners from the proposed territory, and again, council would have to act within 6 months, or it would be considered formed by consent by default. But the other option is for MUDs 2 and 3 to enter into a fire service agreement directly with the city, and that would avoid the creation of another taxing authority in place. So this is the information I think that we've been concerned about and up for discussion, the staff recommendation. This recommendation comes purely out of our analysis of all the quantitative elements, it's not a political assessment. It's not meant to do anything other than look at the facts and bring this information to bear. And I think our staff recommendation stems from the fact that after creation, ESD4 could be a valid resource for covering MUDs 2 and 3. ESD3 already serves portions of the MUDs, and so they could expand their territory to cover these areas. And again, as presented in the previous slide, a fire service agreement with MUDs 2 and 3 could raise the same amount of tax dollars or payments to pay the city for the services they're receiving. And another concern, again, is this adds another layer of taxing authority over an area that already has a jurisdiction that has taxable capability. And with that, we'll pass back the balance back to council.
If I could, Mayor, just to add a couple more things. As we've laid out, there is, I think, at least some consideration that could be given to not having the additional ESD. Facts are that, most of these ESDs, as you look at them, are for larger areas. As far as representation goes, as has been described for both of these, the county commission appoints the board members. There's 5 of them. Their tradition or practice has been to at least have each of the commissioners have an appointment, and ESD, the ETJ for the city has 3 different commissioners, so there'd still be 2 more on top of that. So it'd be like saying that just because we don't have a city council member from every neighborhood doesn't mean that they don't have representation. There would be representation, and those would be appointed by the county commissioners, and the county commission has had each of the commissioners get to at least pick one of those, and there'd still be some left over. So, fact is we don't have an ESD now that we're contracting with, providing this. We'd have to administer that, enter into a contract if they decided that they wanted to work with Pearland for the same high level of service we've been providing. And I think these other considerations at least bear some consideration by the council, but just ask your, decide that tonight so that things can go forward, and then we'll go from there. So thank you, sir.
Okay. Let's get a little response to that, starting with Carbone.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess there's a lot of conflicting info in terms of what the city's, what we've heard that the city's saying in terms of forming a new ESD 4 and 5. It seems like there's other ways to skin the cat that would be quite a bit cleaner, maybe not result in as many legal fees for some folks, but could get to the same end result. I guess a question for staff, the public hearing on the 14th of August down Brazoria County, did we attend that?
We were there just to observe, and procedurally, I don't know that we would have been in a position to make any recommendation. That's for the county commission to decide their piece, and then we knew that was coming to council for consent, so we wouldn't have been, empowered, I think, to make any recommendation at that point. And just to back up a little bit, I think, as you alluded, after the March council consideration, we met in April with our county commissioners just to sort through the various options. So we jumped on that right away, and came to the conclusion that an ESD for the ETJ would be the best route for all things considered. It wasn't until the petitions, or we heard about that coming after the fact, that there was this idea about multiple ESDs. If I can add to that, Clay, staff have attended the MUD board meetings, and I was present at the August 14th public hearing with Brazoria County, and we have taken the approach not, of course, to speak on behalf of council or the city. We were there for pure observational purposes, and with the MUD board meetings themselves, I think the core content of that discussion as far as what would actually take place has taken place in executive session, so staff were not privy to the plan to go in this direction.
That completes your report.
Yep, for now, Mayor.
Reed?
Thank you, Mayor. My phone's ringing.
If that ESD chose to, or that area chose to contract with, maybe another city, Manville or something like, they have that choice, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. You also mentioned, or Joel, maybe you mentioned the possibility that that area could have contracted or could contract directly with the city without the formation of an ESD.
That's correct. We do have other municipal utility districts that contract with the city in a very similar way with the fire service agreement that does not require the formation of an ESD.
So their MUD could come and directly contract with us.
That's correct.
Was there any discussion from, obviously, from their MUD board or their MUD attorneys with us? Have they reached out to us?
So our role in those meetings has been, of course, to engage in those kinds of conversations, but without making any recommendations. There are several options for, how you go about doing this. And we've looked at the, traditional best practice ones. And, of course, an emergency service district and or a fire service agreement are the two most common. So those have been the kinds of things that have been part of that discussion. But our role has really been to make sure that there's transparency and information out there as far as what our considerations are where costs are concerned, and just the general logistical outlay of terms and conditions for how we provide services. So we have not made any official or unofficial recommendations as to how that took place. We've just given the information as we've devised it.
Is there one way that's more cost effective than the other, as opposed to ESD or contracting with the city?
They both work towards achieving the
for the citizens.
For the citizens, I think for the citizens, of course, both have the option of being able to put out a household or per connection cost outlay that provides revenue for the entity that's providing those services. And either way can help determine what that is. The fire service agreement is probably a little bit more flexible because there's not a constitutional cap on the 10 cent per $100 of appraised value. So actual costs, of course, could probably be a consideration. But again, it allows us, either one of them allow us to negotiate.
But in fact, their current MUD board, who's, I'm assuming, is elected by their citizens and not by the county commissioners, would be the ones negotiating that contract with us, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so they would have representation from their citizens, from the people that they've already chosen to represent their MUDs, contracting with us.
That's correct. Member Reed, if I could, just one thing to keep in mind on that, though, and it's their problem, but because MUD 2 and 3 extends beyond the City of Pearland's ETJ, they'd have to figure out how they would collect that proportionally. I mean, those folks in the Manville are already paying 10 cents to ESD 3, you know what I'm saying? So they'd have to figure out some way to rebate or figure that out, because I don't know how they'd collect and pay for just the Pearland portion.
So you're saying it would be difficult for the MUD to come into a situation where they negotiated on their citizens' behalf, or it would be difficult for them to collect?
Well, I assume there could be a mechanism where, like you said, all that first part is true. They could have the MUD board. There wouldn't have to be another governmental body. It's their people, et cetera, et cetera. And then we would send them an invoice, and then they'd have to figure out how to collect from the people in the Pearland ETJ portion. So it's doable. It's just that's their issue. They'd have to figure out. Does that make sense? Or
No, it makes sense. I mean, we're showing them who the people would be, by this map. But yeah, I'm sure the MUD could figure that out, and they've been in existence for quite some time. My biggest thing is kind of what I said in the beginning. This technically should be one ETJ. This is too small. I mean, one ESD. It's too small of an area to have another ESD exist. I think it's a waste of time. I know it's a waste of time. Only from a legal standpoint. My firm deals with ESDs, and this is not a very cost-effective move. And again, I encourage you all to educate yourselves on what you're doing. Also, to ask your MUD attorneys what the other options are. We're here to vote on whether or not you can go and vote. So that's different from me deciding on whether or not this thing should be in existence or not. But that's all the comments I have for now, Mayor.
Mayor, if I can follow up, So it sounds like the city has been presenting facts and answering questions, but hadn't really given our opinion as to a solution? Is that?
We present the solution of an ESD, and then after the idea of the two came up, that's when said, well, they could go to this area could go to ESD3, could go, pay us directly from the MUD. So we initially post April, May said, makes sense for presenting an Pearland ETJ ESD. The options or the alternatives that you heard about here, we've come up with in the last couple weeks, and that's what we recommended. If I could, too, the idea of, well, just put it to a vote, I understand that sentiment, but the fact is that would have implications for the city. It's not just one-sided, that then there'd be this governmental body, and then they'd, either they'd come to the city for contract services or something else. So it's not just like, sometimes with the bond issue or something like that, well, let the people decide. There's other implications for the city from that.
Well, I mean, there's obviously, the spread between the 614 or whatever the number is and the additional 100 that would be, but I guess what are the other implications that could have a negative effect on the city, meaning the citizens that are Pearland residents?
So we would have our staff, managing, trying to negotiate, deal with this contract for just this small area. Administration of that, answering to that, it's just those kinds of things. It's something else that we'd have to work on. That'd be one of the easy implications for that. And then, as you mentioned, if they went a separate ESD route, then they've got their administrative overhead on top of that, which cuts into the whatever that is amount that would be available for actually providing the services.
So I guess kind of along the lines of what was just asked about, what recommendations did we make as the city? Obviously we were there as observers, but was it ever mentioned? And I guess this would be a question more or less for the county commissioners that, hey, look, there's another ESD forming. Why not all become part of that same ESD? I wasn't looking any particular direction, but I mean,
okay, council member.
we should.
We have, kind of shied away from making specific recommendations because we realize that there are other governing bodies that are there to do that. We've tried to provide the information as, fluid and transparent as possible. There's some pros and cons to all the options, but we've, again, tried to make sure that our focus has been on providing the information about the cost of our services, the logistics of doing so, and those types of things. So we have kind of stayed away from making any strong recommendations.
I know there's no one up here that doesn't want to see everyone in this room and everyone in the ETJ receive services, fire and EMS. That's necessary. So, no one's saying that. We're just trying to figure out what the best way possible is for both sides, for you all and for us. And so, and us meaning, the citizens of Pearland that actually, are paying for these services right now. And so there's obviously a lot of questions that need to be answered. We don't want to put ourselves in a worse situation than we already are in, from the standpoint of providing services to areas that are not I guess putting money in the pot. But at the end of the day, everyone needs services. Like I said, that's all I have for right now, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Cover a few things. One, I want to personally thank Commissioner Adams for his work on this. A large majority of this area that would be serviced by a creation of a singular ESD is outside of his district. But he worked vigorously to make sure that there was an option for y'all, and y'all were educated. He certainly didn't have to do that. And I think the principal reason we're in this room having this conversation is built on the back of that commissioner. Also, Jeff Brennan, I know, has worked very hard on this as well. But I think I'd regret if I didn't have an opportunity to at least thank Commissioner Adams for all the work that he's put into this to make sure that y'all have options. There's a number of things to unpack, I think, with respect to what the city's desire is, and the comments about us politicizing this. This is not a political issue. This is not us trying to politicize anything. I mean, to be honest with you, we just voted for the formation of a district for people who do not vote for us. It's not a political. It's not a political benefit to us to do that. What our desire was to annex the areas that were in our future plan so that we could continue to provide these services as we had committed to. To be fair, MUDs 2 and 3 were not part of that annexation plan. Y'all were outside of it, but we intended to continue to provide service. I think it's very telling that most of the people who stood in these rooms and fought so vigorously to ensure that we had no right to annex you are not here. That they made statements about how they are not members of Pearland, contradicting what some of y'all just said, that y'all feel like you're part of Pearland. That they made statements that we had no services that they wanted, that their fire and EMS are not good enough for them. The sheriff does fine. And that was the basis of their argument. And that's why what they sued upon. And the county district attorney agreed with her and agreed to move forward the suit. I also want to point out, there's no state representative that's coming in here and saying, if we don't allow you to annex, that they're going to take over service for you. And they're the ones who pulled the rug out from underneath us for future annexation by changing the law to force our hand. I don't see a governor or a lieutenant governor that's coming in here and telling you they're going to give you the service for which we can no longer provide. If you want to see where the politics are, it's at that level. It's not here. We extended this service to these areas for decades with no cost being returned to us, on the promise that eventually it would be paid back, as I said before. There is no other city that I'm aware of that does this, not a single one. There are agreements for mutual aid, like us and Friendswood and us will go there, they come here. But there is no city that extends service beyond their city limits that I'm aware of, and I've talked to a lot. There's no ESDs that are formulated. For instance, Alvin they're not served by the City of Alvin General Fund. They have an ESD that extends beyond their city limits. That ESD does not extend service beyond their boundary. If they get to their boundary, they stop, which is what we are proposing, or eventually what we will end up with. What we may end up with if these ESDs somehow do not pass through is essentially regular order, as opposed to what was there before and was prevented by the suit by the people no longer in this room, no longer voicing their opinions, who stated they didn't want our service. They weren't in Pearland. They moved to the county because they didn't want to be a part of a city, and we had no service that we provided them that they wanted. So that's why we're in this situation. At our direction, our staff has tried to find a solution. But the solution needs to be, frankly, simple and easy for the citizens of Pearland. This is not an entitlement, but if we do give it to you, if we are providing you the service, you are subsidized. You will continue to be subsidized by the tax-paying members of the City of Pearland. No matter what happens, if this ESD forms, you will not cover your costs. By basic math, unless your home is valued at close to $400,000, you're not going to pay enough in taxes to come close to paying for the ESD or for the services that we would provide based on the per capita cost for us to provide services per home. So we're all in a difficult position. I don't like where we are, but we have to proceed in a manner that is fair to everybody. I hear a lot of the taxation without representation. We want to make sure that we have representatives. There's no guarantee of that. Just because you have an ESD form just for your area, you could parse it out even more. You could say, well, there's no representatives from 2 as opposed to 3. There's nobody who lives in my section that's a member of this. East versus west, north versus south. There's a lot of ways this can continue to be parsed. I understand the argument, but just because it is not guaranteed that somebody within this relatively arbitrary boundary is not going to be promised a position on an ESD if it formed, does not mean that y'all aren't going to be fairly represented. If you were part of 4, then you would just make sure that your commissioner knows that you want somebody appointed that lives in that boundary. And I would hope that he would listen to you. I think it's difficult for me to hear that we don't care about your health and safety. To be honest with you, I just find that offensive. We've cared for your health and safety for several decades. What was put before us is the inability to continue to do that without some promise to return to the citizens of Pearland. This is a way for us to continue the service that we've provided you. This is this is not the most ideal tool in the toolbox. The ideal tool was the annexation. The reason y'all were in our ETJ, the reason we extended service was that eventually we would annex you and y'all would pay in. I think what's most fair to the citizens of Pearland is that we have simplicity in what we're managing. If we have two ESDs or multiple ESDs, as what is proposed, it becomes difficult on our staff to manage it. And it will create an inherent inequity. As ESD4 formulates over time in 15, 20 years, they may feel like, why aren't we being treated as fairly as ESD5? ESD5 may say, wait, we're paying more per capita. We should have a fire station in our ESD. Why are you building it over there by the airport? Even though, our strategic plan says that may be where it's most needed. It's going to put a lot of pressure on our staff and a lot of pressure on future councils, in my opinion, if we create 2 SDs. It's going to create an us versus them. We have that already a little bit with some of the MUDs that we have SPA agreements with, MUD 6 and Lakes of Savannah. It's already created some difficulty. I don't want to put this at the feet of future councils for them to have to figure out a mess that we've created for them. So with that, I would say I'm going to be a no on the formation of ESD 5. What I would encourage y'all to do is join ESD 4 if that passes. If not, join ESD 3 if they'll let you. If not, then talk to your MUD and find out if there's a way for y'all to contract with services some other way. But I don't think another governmental body is going to be of benefit to y'all or to the city or to the citizens of Pearland. That's all I have, Mayor, for now.
Thank you, Mayor. Going back to very similarly what I said for number 4, I look at this from the perspective that I was elected by the citizens of the City of Pearland to protect their tax dollars as well as I can. We've got about $100,000 kind of in between what would be spent versus what's collected. And that, again, that's not even guaranteeing that, there wouldn't be any other type of administrative costs on top of that. And I really think about, I don't know why this analogy popped in my head. If I had a pipe burst at my house and, water's pouring everywhere and I hire a plumber to come and I pay him $1,000 to fix it, he wraps up and says he's done, leaves, and he leaves me with a leak, a small trickle. I think that's kind of what's been going on. We've been spending this money for so long, and I think we're still going to be, the citizens of Pearland are going to still be subsidizing this. And I think if ESD 5 was part of number 4, the 10-cent cap that would be our option. And I think that would be a reasonable option. But because it's given us several different potential revenue sources, and the 10-cent cap maybe is not the best, and we have the potential to close that gap entirely, I think at least my duty to the people who elected me, as far as I see it, would be to try to find a way to close that gap entirely, to remove that subsidy off the backs of the Pearland taxpayers. And as far as I'm concerned, I pay Pearland City tax to receive fire and EMS and police service, and I think we've got the best police force, the best fire service in this area. So, as far as I'm concerned, I don't see whether it'd be an issue with finding another mechanism if we've got the option to go to the MUDs and contract directly to just pay for the service that you're receiving. I think that's fair for everybody involved, and that's just, like I said, I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of the situation that we're in, seeing that you kind of separated yourself and given us additional options. I just have to choose the option I think puts the Pearland citizens in the best position.
Little?
Clay, one of the bullet points for opposing the creation of ESD5 was that it's another governmental entity and it can take on debt. What type of debt would you foresee this entity taking on?
It would be theoretical. I mean, if they decided that they wanted to build their own station or some facility, and either us or somebody else staff it, that would presumably require debt to do like we do with our fire stations.
Would the service of that debt come out of that 10-cent statutory?
True, yeah, they're maxed out at 10 cents, so it's operations and ESD. So, yes.
So, 10 cents per $100 of property value is all that the ESD would be allowed to charge their citizens
Right.
for the services. They couldn't go above and beyond that for their administration.
Right. The only way you could get around if there was a sales tax, but that's maxed out too. So yes.
Okay, you mentioned earlier that the city would invoice each of the ESDs. Are you going to you invoice the MUD or the ESD?
So if there was an ESD, we would, if they went to us and said we'd have to negotiate a contract for the service, have what that would entail, what we would do for reporting, all those kinds of things. And then there'd be a bill to the ESD in that case. The alternative that was bandied about was if the MUDs wanted to contract with us directly for that service, then presumably they could do the same thing, have a contract, but then we would send a bill to the MUD in that case.
Well, I commend all of you that came out tonight in support of the creation of ESD5. Obviously, you're very passionate about it. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mayor. I just bring this to attention to the residents, the options that you have in front of you besides doing an ESD. You could work with the MUD to have a contract done, which you wouldn't need an ESD to do that. You could join either ESD4 or ESD3. So, I mean, there's options out there, so I just ask you to look into those options. But I wouldn't want to hold this back from being able to go to a vote of the residents to be able to say what you want to do. But I would encourage you to do your homework on that and make sure that when it comes out to go to a vote, you understand what you're voting on. And like I said before, I hate to create another government entity, another layer of government to go through all of this, but it's kind of where we are. In this case, y'all do have another option, excuse me, besides doing that. You already have a government entity, and that's your MUDs. So just something to think about.
Owens?
Yeah, the only thing I would say on that, I mean, I'll go ahead and vote for it for the people to be able to take their own choice of what they want to do. But you sit within Fire Station 5 and 4, which is maybe a mile and a half at the most. Sitting right across and look at the two dots up there in red, that's two fire stations. But if that's what you want to do, I'll vote for it. Go ahead and take your vote and let y'all make a decision on your future.
I have another question for staff. If this goes to the MUDs, so if the ESD goes to vote, residents vote for it, it's formed, we're not looking at revenue until 2020. If we try to persuade them to go the MUD route, how quickly could that be parsed out, and would we still provide service in the interim while we're negotiating that? Is there a timetable on that as far as revenue coming in?
So two separate questions. It'd be up to the city council about whether we amend that resolution from March and were to continue to provide service. As you stated, there wouldn't be money coming in if, for instance, ESD 4, which you did give consent to, wouldn't be coming into us. So I would presume and encourage that, frankly, they've met the resolution and they're proceeding with that if it passes in November, and that we would continue to provide that service in 2019 until, they can get that sorted out and, contract with us or whoever they're going to do that with. So going back to if we went to the mud route directly, we could certainly say that we want money, coming into 19. We can't continue to keep carrying this. But, I would suspect they'd come back very quickly and say, well, that ESD 4 area is not paying, why should we? So, that's just the reality of the timing. We would have not much leverage in that kind of a circumstance. Make sense?
Is that your final comments, Woody?
Yeah, I was just answering the question, so I don't know if I...
Me, yeah.
Yep. I guess to follow up on the debt, I guess that's I wouldn't say a threat, but that's an issue for future annexation if ESD 5 did form and issue debt. But at the end of the day, there's not enough money there to operate a facility, much less within a 10-cent cap issue debt for capital, for capital projects.
Right, and I hope I stipulated that was theoretical. They could not only build it for a building, but for equipment. If they were to buy a $900,000 ladder truck or something like that, it'd be a little bit more than just a building. But and that, you may recall, is one of the reasons that we, after looking at the choices, suggested a standalone ESD for our entire ETJ, was that there wouldn't be presumably this debt issue for the entirety of that, like there would be with going to ESD 3, for instance. That was another choice. So.
Yeah, and noted, but they're not going to spend $1 million on a fire truck and not park it in a building. So, we're going to have facilities, right. And they couldn't. I think theoretically, could a new ESD issue debt? Yes. Is it practical? No. And it seems like the city has. We have a lot of recommendations now, but I don't hear. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joel, but I don't know that we gave a clear push or clear guidance through this process. And now we get to the point, and a lot of folks have worked their tail off getting signatures, and we want to say, no, we wanted it done a different way. But I don't hear where we overly communicated that through the process.
It's probably close to accurate, Your Honor, but I think one of the issues that challenges us is that we were not in every situation in a place where we could have that discussion in an official capacity because they took place in executive session. We certainly would have been open to more of a discussion, but really just were not able to do so in the confines of the mud board situations. So that may have gotten away from us there. But again, we operated from the standpoint that they needed the information that we had to provide as far as cost and capability, and that, the options that would present themselves would be available for you all to act on.
And I'll add on to that, and as council knows, we've communicated as we went through this and learned and, sorted through that, and got to the conclusion of an ESD for the ETJ. That was the last thing that we were communicating and had suggested working with the county commissioners. And so, these interim thing, the idea of a separate ETJ was between that, and that was off and running on its own.
Well, and I think I struggle to say we didn't communicate that because I've been following this pretty closely for a while. It was a single ESD for quite some time until pretty close to the last minute of the public hearing, or before we approached the public hearings, is when there was a statement from the citizens who lived in MUD 2 and 3 that they want their own ESD. It was always the intent for us to suggest that if there's going to be an ESD solution, it'd be a single ESD. And I think the logistics of it mean that logically it needs to be a single ESD. Neither one of these areas are going to be big enough and generate enough revenue for them to operate on their own. Parsing these are out, and it can continue to be parsed. I mean, there's nothing that says the airport doesn't say, hey, we want our own representation, so we want our own ESD. And then the area that wraps around Lakes of Savannah, well, we want our own representation, we want our own ESD. For every argument that works for ESD 2 or for MUDs 2 and 3, it can be continued to be divided and divided and divided by the same argument. I think the danger that we face right now is if we vote to approve ESD 5 and we communicate to the citizens of ESD 5 and the citizens of Pearland, we support the formation of this ESD. I think what we can judge by the attendance in this room, ESD 5 may have a good chance of passing. ESD 4 may not. And then what are we left with? We're left with servicing only one area that had another option and the rest, and we don't service ESD 4. And then we continue to put stress on our staff to try and figure out where the boundaries are. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon us for us to make a solution that is as simple and clear for the citizens of Pearland and provides these people the service that we've given them as an option. I think the formation, the bureaucracy created, unnecessary bureaucracy created by creating 2 ESDs solely because one area is worried that they won't get an appointee, we're causing more problems than we solve. There is no reasonable solution to that argument that means 2 ESDs is better. If we vote on this, again, I think that come November, we're going to have one small patch of South Fork that we're going to be serving, and the rest of the district, the rest of our EATJ, we're not. Or we're going to approve it. They're going to go out. They're going to approve the ESD, and we're going to come back and say, well, this is not what we envisioned. We envisioned an ESD that served our entire ETJ, and we're not really up to serving just this small pocket and this one ESD. That's a possibility. There's no guarantee that we'll serve just ESD 5 if 4 doesn't happen. There's no guarantee that future councils will acquiesce to this. I think their greatest power is in their coalition. I think look, I appreciate the conversation of, hey, we're putting it to the voters, but what we're doing is sanctifying the formation of of ESD 5. We're saying that we think that's a good idea. And if you're arguing against it, then you're not saying it's a good idea. If we put it to them and we're left holding the bag thinking, well, of course, all of this will get formed, and that doesn't happen, that's going to be back on us for us to parse that out. The responsibility is going to be back on the citizens of the city of Pearland and their council to try and work through the mess that we created. And again, Lakes of Savannah is a great example of how bad that can get screwed up. And if we keep creating these half-hearted efforts as opposed to holding the ground and making sure that what is best for the citizens of Pearland is what is met, then we're going to continue to put pressure on future councils to clean up messes that we make.
Mr. Hardy, can you expand on what happens if the ESD 4 doesn't go to a vote?
So are you saying if the voters don't approve that
Yes.
ESD?
Yes, what happens?
If the voters don't approve that ESD, the process ends right there. They just don't form the ESD. I believe that they would probably have to start the process over again, but there could be some other statutory considerations for that, but they're stuck in the water in that regard.
So how do they get services without the ESD?
For the unincorporated areas that aren't in a special purpose district, that's the difficult challenge we face because there's not an organized way of doing that as far as revenue collection. With the MUDs, of course, there is that capability, but the unincorporated areas, I guess the best option would be annexation, of course, but not being part of our corporate boundaries and not having a special purpose district in place, they don't have that capability.
Okay, I just want a clarification. And just to answer your question, I'm not in favor of ESD 5. I do not want ESD 5. I think it's not going to be to your benefit to have ESD 5, but I also think that you have the power to vote your own destiny. So I think that you should have the vote, but I'm not for ESD 5. There.
Well,
That doesn't give consent.
Fair enough. Well, I would just say this. So what if we say, let's say we have a 4-3 vote. ESD 5 is approved by us. It goes to the voters. The voters approve it. Then we come back and say, well, ESD 5 formed, and we didn't really want ESD 5, so now we're making the decision not to serve them. They don't have the capability of serving themselves.
But if they vote for it, then I'll support it.
Well, then you support it. Look, the hope is that both
I'm just
of
trying
the-
to make sure that I clarify where I'm at on it, because you said that we're giving consent. So I'm not giving consent for ESD 5, but I'm giving consent for the vote.
I think that's consent. I mean, that's what we're voting upon. We're voting to consent to the formation of the district so that they can go to vote on it. It's our consent, then their consent. If we do not consent, then they don't have the right to vote. And look, I'm all for this, the citizens having the right to vote and control their own destiny, but that's not what they have. If they vote for this ESD, they're still not in control of their own destiny. They don't have the ability to provide service for themselves.
They can make that decision. I mean, they're here, they're listening to some of us talk more than others, and they can do their research and they can decide, hey, you know what? We thought 5 was a great idea. Let's talk to the MUD board and see if we can go that route. And they could quite possibly vote ESD 5 down.
Or we could be honest with them and tell them that we don't want the formation of ESD 5. We want them to be a part of ESD 4. We want one ESD for this entire ETJ. Force them to go back and renegotiate and create one ESD, which is best for the citizens of the City of Pearland, and not kick the can down the road. If they form that and form doesn't get formed, it's a bigger mess. It's a bigger, predictable mess. Look, you can call the question, we can vote on it, but if your only point is to what's simple right now, let's not have us hold the bag, or make a difficult decision now, you're just going to make a difficult decision later. The staff gave her the recommendation not to approve this for a reason.
Mayor, I want a question for this. Oh, the question.
You can tell this is our first emergency medical service district. The county has already done 1, 2, and 3, so they've had some experience at it. But we need to make a decision as to whether we say there is a viable opportunity for 5 or there really is not for 5. But either way, it's a challenge for the city because we're sort of in a situation where I don't know of any of the other emergency medical systems or in the ETJ of a city. And I'm not sure whether the city council would agree if they proceeded in the process of getting approval and everybody voted to go ahead, whether the city council would want to provide the service or not. Now, that's a challenge that we're looking at. So we're working our way through this. So let's make the process go through. Clay, did you have any wrap-up comments before we proceed?
No, I think it's been called, so I think it's nothing else, sir.
None. Okay. Okay. Mr. Secretary, we have a motion second on the floor. Let's see how it comes out.
Councilmember Hernandez,
No.
Councilmember Little,
Yes.
Councilmember Moore,
Aye.
Councilmember Owens,
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
I'm not for the ESD, but I'm not going to stop people from voting. And so aye.
Councilmember Perez.
No.
Motion passed 5-2.
That means you can proceed to the next stage. That which is good luck to you in the process. Moving in our agenda to item number 4, Councilmember Little, would you present this for our consideration? Thank all of you for being here tonight. You've been quite a fine group of citizens and appreciate you. Wish you best of luck.
Consideration and possible action, second and final reading of ordinance number 1565. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. On the floor, any further motions from the council? Hearing none, staff report.
Thank you, sir. This is a request of MUD 22 Lake Savannah for addition of land to their existing MUD area. It's in the unincorporated area. And so they've secured land that they'd like to continue their development. And we had the first reading last meeting, and we as staff recommended a positive consideration for you.
Okay. We have a staff report. Ask the council if they had, I think Tony stepped out for a while. Councilman Reed, what's your comment?
Mayor, I still hold on my prior vote of no. I mean, there's many other issues that that this area is facing and where this money could go, in my opinion. So my vote's still the same, no. I think that's actually the only reason why we're back.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, we do have a motion second on the floor here. Proceed with that.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
No.
Councilmember Owens?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
We have a 3-3 tie, Mayor, with Councilmember.
Yeah, I vote no.
But, Mayor, Mr. Carbone came in there.
I'm sorry.
Hold on.
Wait. I saw him come in. I got to stop. We have one vote.
I vote.
Are we at a tie vote right now?
I'm gonna ask for a legal ruling.
He was not here.
I didn't hear what he voted.
I voted in favor of the, excuse me. Yeah.
Just to
But I was
clarify, the
waiting.
door
I
was
saw him come
open
in
and
I
the
voted.
council member was walking into the chambers at the time the vote was taken. And so, given that consideration, I believe the council member should be allowed to vote on the matter.
When he started coming in, I wanted to back off and give him the right.
We're on
I still
ordinance
have to vote if I-
1565.
If he didn't,
Yes,
I
and
wanna
it's
vote.
currently a 3-3 vote.
I vote aye.
Motion passed 4-3.
Okay, moving to item number 5, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration, possible action, first reading of ordinance number 1121-1. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start this item off here. You may recall at our last regular council meeting, we discussed ordinance number 1121, which specifically relates to retiree health care benefits. And we have some recommendations included in the updated ordinance. I'd like to briefly go over those with you so that you have an understanding specifically what we're recommending here. In sections 3 and sections 4 of the ordinance, what we're doing there is we're clarifying the age and length of service that's required to receive various benefits. Also, in section 4, what we're stating here and what we're clarifying is that the city shall provide to employees under the age of 65 access to the same level of coverage that those individuals' employees receive. And then we're also clarifying that those employees that are over 65, that they would be able to receive coverage or access to Medicare supplemental plan once they reach the age of 65 years. Also in section 5, we're clarifying the new GASB 75 accounting standard and how that we define how we're calculating retirees' benefit for those individuals that are retiring prior to October 1 of this year. And then we're also clarifying that moving forward, how we're going to calculate retiree cost in accordance with GASB 75, where that it will be, currently, we're using the blended rate for those individuals that have retired or that will retire, have and will retire prior to October of 2018. And moving forward, it will actually be the cost calculated by the retiree insurance cost itself. And then moving on down, what we're also wanting to clarify in Section 6 of the ordinance is to clarify that current retirees will not be eligible for a subsidy moving forward, that they're going to get the same benefit that they had when they initially retired, whereas they'll be responsible for the blended rate for the insurance. And there's only 4 current individuals that have retired. And finally, I would say the bigger issue in front of you is what we're recommending as far as a subsidy. And there's 2 different types of subsidies that we're recommending. On table number 1 in your packet, it shows that we're recommending for those individuals that have that are 60 years of age or older and have served the city for 15 years to 19.99 years, we're recommending a 50% subsidy on their cost of the insurance. And for those employees, or excuse me, those retirees that have 20 years of service and are 60 years of age, we are recommending a 100% subsidy. So that's an option that we are recommending in this particular update to the ordinance. And finally, we're also recommending an additional portable subsidy whereby those same individuals that if they have 20 years of service if they have 15 to 1999 years of service and are 60 years of age or older, they could go off of the city's insurance plan and receive a portable subsidy of $300 per month. And if they have 20 years or more of service and are of 60 years of age, they would receive a $600 portable subsidy per month. Again, we're only talking about gap insurance in these 2. In this particular case, we're talking about from the time that they retire up until 65, and then at 65, they would have a Medicare supplement. So those are the recommendations. And we recommend your consideration and approval of this matter, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, that was a good presentation, and I appreciate it, brother. I think it had clarity to it. Did the council have any questions or comments at this point?
Thank you, Mayor. When we look at Table 1 versus Table 2, so Table 1 is a straight percentage of a calculated subsidy. I mean, health insurance costs have outpaced inflation for quite a bit. Would it not make more sense to make the portable index with that premium subsidy? Instead of, because right now, if you go down to Table 2, we're pegging it to what, 300, 600? Would it not make, I mean, that might be great and that's close today, but fast forward the tapes 4 years and we're paying less and less as a percentage of the actual portable cost.
And that's an excellent concern. What we could do theoretically is come back at a later time each year when those rates are defined, and you could supplement this portion of the ordinance. So you could change the amount, whether it be $300 or $600. And each year, and I neglected to mention this, each year what would happen is we would come back to you with the new rates. And so the 50% this year might be different than the 50% next year. And I'm talking about for the premium subsidy.
And contribution also, right?
That's correct. I think from my perspective, you're right. It would end up, it could change and be less of a benefit, but it's also could cost the city more money in the long run. So each year we could come back and we could address that portion of it, the portable subsidy.
Is it written, it's not written in the ordinance right now that we would be required to look at it, review it every year or every 2 years, correct? Okay. So, I mean, because I think with Table 1 and Table 2, I kind of share this concern. You know, we say we're going to take 100% at 20 years plus, and then we have a lot of retirees, and it's really putting putting difficulty on our annual budget. At least we would have a mechanism where the city council at that time could say, let's review this, and is there a benefit to reducing it? I would support reducing it, but it gives us an opportunity to review it to lower the cost of the city if needed, or if we find out $600 a month is not enough, we could increase the amount so that we could create equity. And I guess what I'm getting at is, should we not put since we have hard caps or hard numbers in here that don't automatically adjust with the cost of inflation or cost of living, should we not just put should we not amend this to where we have to revisit this every 2 years, particularly these values?
My recommendation, if you choose to do that, and Michelle may want to jump in on this, as she is the retiree healthcare expert, but my thoughts are that you don't do that for the premium subsidy, that you set 50% and 100%, and then if you want to look at the portable subsidy, you could do that on an annual basis.
Another option to that is if you wanted to add language into the ordinance that allows for an escalation factor to be factored into the the portable subsidy, you can do that. Or we can adjust the language to make it match the amount that's given by the premium subsidy. We can change the way that table looks. There are 2 other options there if you decide to approve the portable subsidy as an option.
I guess, would staff prefer the automatic escalator, or would they prefer just to have to review it every couple of years?
I would leave that to council's discretion. Last time this ordinance was reviewed, it was in 2003.
I guess, any other council members have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I'd like Table 2 to be at 50% and 100%, similar to Table 1, and that way you don't have to visit annually.
Mayor, we've talked about this a couple times, so this idea about the indexing, I mean, it makes sense, but, you know, just reacting on the fly, I think the idea would be make this as autopilot as possible so that we're not revisiting it. Frankly, you know, when you get through these things, just hard. You get retirees and employees, and it's just very challenging. So as much as we can make it on a path, so there's some certainty or knowing about that, and I think if you did the percentage on Table 2, it makes sense. 600 today is not the same as 600 in 5 years. Index that somehow, if that's the way you want to go. But I wouldn't suggest you try to put yourselves in a position of looking at a new ordinance every year as part of budget and the vagaries of whatever's, you know, 7 people are sitting up here at that time. They can always look at it if they wanted to, but to try to plan on that, I think, is just asking for trouble.
Do we just tie it to cost of living?
Why don't we just tie it to the table right above it? I mean, that's what they're calculating it anyway.
Do we have the money to do this?
Yes, sir. We have in our employee health insurance fund, we have $1.4 million that we'll end up with at the end of this year and a fund balance, and then we'll also have that. We're estimating the same for next year.
Okay, so if an individual retires at 62 and got 20 years in, and we subsidize $600 a month?
For 3 years.
Yep, 3 years, for the 3 years on there. The only thing I would say, you know, if you're going to do something like that and you put a benefit in there, it's very difficult to take that benefit back if you get in a situation that you really can't afford to do it later on down the road. It's going to be a difficult situation for you to be able to do that. And I think that one thing that I asked previously, if you got 20 years and you're 62 years old and you decide to retire, you retire from the city. But if you go out and take a consulting job or you go to work for somebody else, do you still pay the insurance for them when they would be able to get that from someone else?
Go ahead, Mr. Coker.
The way the ordinance is drafted, the answer to that is yes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it would be an insurmountable challenge for the city to be able to be policing what happens after a person retires. So the ordinance, the premise of the benefit that's being offered here is based upon, we're going to provide this benefit based upon the number of years that you provided service to the city of Pearland, and so it's a benefit. If a person retires at age 62 and goes out, and whether it's a consulting job or whatever, and they opt to take a portable subsidy for their own plan, at the end of the day, that's very difficult for us to police and then try to put a provision in here that would say you lose the benefit if you're out and you go out and secure subsequent employment. It would be very difficult.
Yeah, well, really the only place you see this is in municipal, county, or state agencies to be able to do that, subsidize that for the interest of the people that are retiring. But yeah, I mean, several years ago when we went through a period of time where we was doing so many inspections and we hired this company to do inspections for us, all of their people on there were retired city people. And that's where they get their staff from, was retired city people to do the inspection. So, you got the person doing full employment and still the city of Pearland subsidizing their insurance. They could get it from the company that they're working for.
I hear you, but the only argument to that would be that, we're giving them that subsidy for the 20 years plus that they work for the city of Pearland, and then what they do with their time or how they do that after that, that's a different story, so.
So we have no way of policing this once we kick in for the subsidy or not. We don't have a way to check it and see.
I think the point was that it'd be a big challenge, and whether we want to police it. I mean, again, we're offering a benefit for the employees that, for the 100% have spent 20 years working for the city, and then, that's what it is, so.
Okay, so what do we do? Each month, just write a check, send them $600?
The expectation would be is if they received the premium subsidy and/or the portable subsidy, well, the portable subsidy would be a reimbursement that would be paid after the fact when we're reimbursing them for their valid healthcare premium cost.
Okay, so if they retired and they go out and get another health care on there, then what they would do is have to provide that to us, the city, in order to get the $600 a month, whatever, 300, whichever it was.
That is correct, and it would be up to what they paid for their insurance. So say, for example, somebody leaves, has insurance coverage, they have an opportunity for up to $300 a month. If their coverage, if we don't see a premium that's equal to that, they get reimbursed up to that amount.
All right, so that's for the individual plus a family.
We would be only subsidizing the employee plan, or the retiree plan at that point, sorry.
Last time we discussed this, I had asked what other municipalities had this. Do we know any other municipalities that offer this?
I am not aware of any right now that offer the portable subsidy option. However, since our discussion, our consultant has told us that they have had that discussion with other entities and they have an interest in it because of what it does for the benefit of the organization, removing people from the plan, reducing the liability long-term. There are other entities that offer some type of benefit, whether it's 50% or whether it's some a portion of the payment. I am aware of at least one county that has it for life, and it's they don't have the restrictions that we have as far as age and the gap. So when we've looked at it, nothing has been consistent across the board. Different organizations do it differently, but many of the ones that we talked to did have some sort of where it was actual benefit to the retiree.
There are two cities that I know of. Missouri City, one. They don't pay that much on it. Deer Park does, but they don't pay that much.
You mentioned about the 1.4 million in the medical coverage that would cover this additional cost for this. How does that affect the insurance, money that we spend for medical insurance budget, with this overage of the 1.4 million and doing this 66,000 for this plan for the next, I don't know, 2 years or whatever it is, or FY19, I guess, only.
And for this next year, if you move forward with the plan for this next year, we'd be looking at about 66,000 total dollars that we'd have to appropriate specifically for this, assuming that everybody that was eligible to retire this year retired this year. So it would be hardly any impact on that fund. The fund itself is at about 33%, and ideally, the fund balance, we want to narrow that down to about 25%. That's industry standard for health and medical insurance fund balance. And so you may recall that at the last meeting I mentioned, if every single employee that retired, that over the next 5 years, if they wanted to retire, based on if you move forward with this policy, we'd be looking at somewhere around $650,000 for that entire time period. So again, that fund, I think, satisfactory covers the cost that we would need to appropriate each individual year to pay for those costs. But then again, like I said, our fund balance right now is about 33%. You may recall a couple of years ago, we did take some of that money out and we did appropriate it so that we were able to reduce the total cost of the insurance to the employees. And that's something we can do with that fund balance in the future. But we think there's adequate monies there now and for the foreseeable future.
Is there a prediction at some point in time that we catch up to that fund balance off of this plan and would end up in a situation where we didn't have the fund balance needed?
Based on the discussions that council has had in seeming continuing discussions that this could be a possibility, staff has been researching other options in creations of funds or trusts that could be used and put in place to make the program more sustainable in the future so that we're not necessarily having to rely on fund balance. That is something that we would continue to explore, but we don't have anything in place right now because it hasn't needed to be in place. So ideally, moving forward, we would like something sustainable to keep the program in place. But for right now, as Mr. Branson mentioned, this year is more than enough covered by what we have in that fund balance.
So technically, this doesn't affect the budget in any way whatsoever at all?
That is correct.
Or up
But
to
I'll
the next
defer to
5
John
years?
McCarter for that.
Or up to the next 5 years?
I would say it doesn't materially change it. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend this ordinance in section 6 to have table 2 mirror table 1 so that the amount of the calculated premium subsidy is the same as the portable subsidy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We had a little bit of discussion there. The staff still have any questions on this at this point?
Just to point out, this is our first reading, so you'll see it again. We'll make that amendment and package that up for next time, so.
Secretary, we have a motion second on the floor here.
This will be for the amendment. Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0. That was the amendment.
Okay, with that information tucked away, let's move to item number
Mayor,
9.
now we need to move to the main motion. That was the amended motion, so we need to move to the main motion.
Oh, that's amendment, okay. Misunderstood him. That's an amendment to the motion. We now have amended motion before us at this point. Council Have any question on the amended motion at this point? We do have a motion, amended motion on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Moore,
No.
Councilmember Owens,
No.
Councilmember Carbone,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Perez,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Little. Motion passed 5-2.
Okay. That information is record. Now let's move to item number 9. Mayor, council issue for future agendas, and ask Clay if he would present this for our
Sure, we were asked to provide some, council wanted to discuss we've got a policy now for some of our contract procurements. We do have a variety of professional service and commodity contracts. We outlined, we have everything from the waste management contract to various professional services, auditing, financial services. Most of those we visit every year and council sees those for pricing, but not all. And so I think the gist of it was just to put that on the table, get some discussion, see if you wanted to change how those are down the future, have a new policy for us, or whatever council may desire on that. So put it back to council and see where you wanted to go.
So Mayor, I actually added this to the agenda for input and discussion. The underlying premise was that, like Clay just mentioned, I mean, there's several contracts that we have or that we've entered into, specifically that we've entered into since I've been on council, that other members of council, even if they serve a full 6 years, will never see, it'll never come back up. And, you know, as council rotates and people come in and out, the citizens are the ones that are putting us here to review what's going on, where their taxpayer dollars are going.
Yeah.
For us to give an award 7 and 8 year contracts, 5-year contracts, even to some of the businesses out there, to no benefit. I mean, we awarded a 7-year contract to our bonding company and to a law firm last year. That law firm would have given us the same rates had we awarded them a 3-year contract. I know this for a fact. And so they'll always come back. I mean, they'll always come back, and they'll always, you know, want to continue working with us. And I'm not saying that we should not continue that work with these with the vendors that we go with, but I think there needs to be a policy in place that kind of limits the term of a contract. No contract should outlast a council member or outlast the term of a council member, to where even some council members, like Councilmember Perez, or I'm not sure if Councilmember Perez was on council when we voted on that law contract, but I know Councilmember Hernandez was not, and so it will outlast his term, even if he wins again, will outlast his full 6 years. And you know, I know, you know, there may be argument, well, we can always go back to it and we can cancel anytime we want. That's not the point. The point is, it's not seen by Councilmember Hernandez or anybody else. You know, Councilmember Owens, I'm not sure if he's seen, you know, the contract that we entered into. And so they won't see those contracts. They won't get a chance to do what it is that they were put here to do, and that's to make sure that the citizens that elected them to serve, that they're serving the citizens that elected them to serve, and make sure that their tax dollars being spent wisely, and just that, not just tax dollars, but the decisions that are being made, you know, wisely. Those contracts need to be up for review periodically, not just by, you know, our staff looking at them, but us as council actually looking at these contracts. These are big contracts, a lot of money. I don't see any reason why we could not put a policy in place, you know, limiting to, you know, maybe 3 years tops.
Just for your clarification, there's only 3 of us up here that know that contract.
So it's me, you, and Tony. Oh, okay. It was Trent's first year, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd certainly.
There's some contracts you want to lock in for a long period of time. I think like waste management, and some of the contracts you want to set some more than a 3-year term. And maybe the other thing, maybe that's, for instance, they're set up for a 10-year term, library system, stuff like, things like that.
Well, the library system.
There are others that I agree that maybe need a shorter.
I think that, to second his point, I've heard a lot of consternation about the waste management contract and that it is a 10-year term and that there will be council members who are elected a couple of years after it was approved and then reach term limit before it comes back up. And I think to Councilmember Reed's point, that we have every time I get a complaint about some aspect of the waste management contract, my only response is it's a 10-year term. There's nothing I can do about it without additional costs. And I do think that there is merit to having a discussion about how we want to limit this and how do we want procedurally, how we want to deal with contracts that need to exceed that term or recommended to exceed that term. Maybe it takes a supermajority to take something over 3 years. I would struggle to argue against wanting to revisit this. I mean, I don't think it's dire, but I mean, if it's brought up, let's talk about it.
The only one I was on was with waste management. And
You'll be off before it comes up.
well, the reason we did that on waste management, the last 2 times we put anything out on city services and which ones were the best, waste management's trash pickup came in at top of the list. But at that time, we wanted the difference in the pickup to be for side pickups on the trucks to come in to be able to do that, and for those big trash bins and recycle bins. And those were something like, I don't know, I think they were $180,000 or $190,000 per truck to put those in there. And then to come in and put all the recycle bins throughout the entire city. That was a tremendous cost for that, and then the trucks to be outfitted to pick them up. And so there was no way that they could get their money back based on what we were paying them for a 3-year contract. There's no way they could do it. So we would have had to come in and not do it at all like that way in order to do that. But having said that, I think that they have been very good people to work with. I don't know about the rest of the city, but on there. But the thing about it is that they've been there. They've helped out, in the recycle area. They even helped us in a period of time when we didn't have a lot of money to come in to go in and give us our money earlier on in the beginning of the year instead of the last of the year. So that was the reason that we done it during that time.
And just to speak out of some experience, I would love for this contract to come back because I would love to make changes to it. There's a lot of people that cannot handle that large recycle bin. When I lived in Fort Worth, we had options. You had 3 different sizes. We also went from twice a week pickup to a once a week pickup, which was a terrible idea because if the stuff didn't fit in your recycle can, you had to wait till next week. If it didn't fit in your trash can, you had to wait till next week. That's not promoting, a sanitary situation. Even if you had the largest cans that they provided, sometimes holidays you can't fit everything in there, so you had to hold on to it for 2-3 weeks before you could get it cycled through. And they also went to an unmanned dumping crew, I guess, to the mechanical arm. That's a terrible idea. The mechanical arm is just awful. They never put the trash cans back where they belong. They were always laying in the middle of the street. They never set them down. They're always laying on their side. So, I mean, if that's in our future, I would love to have a say-so in that. And I would love to be able to, look at that contract if that's where we're headed, because that's not what we need.
Just get a smaller can if you'd like. Just call them up and they'll give you a smaller can.
At what cost?
Nothing.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Oh, yeah, I mean, so the reason why I supported adding this to the agenda was, just from the perspective of what I think Councilmember Reed brought up, that giving every council member the opportunity to then have that input in the discussion, especially for what I consider to be like a core city service, I just see that as an important aspect of just the election process, giving the people the opportunity to vote for somebody to go into council chambers and then represent them, I think as the priorities of the community change. Obviously, I think the representation may change along with those priorities. And then also giving the opportunity then for us to kind of learn the ropes, kind of get a feel for how this process works. And then I think by the time we're in a position to maybe actually effectively evaluate some of these things or effectively contribute to some of these agreements, contracts, and so forth, the procedures that we have before us, it's just one of those, it's like when we're finally in that position, we're out the door and we've never had the opportunity to review maybe a contract or something that, again, would be very important, I think, to the core services that are provided by the city. So I think it's part of a larger discussion that myself and some of the other council members had about just kind of the process in general. And I think the city's growing, and I think as we grow, things are changing, and things change at a rapid pace. And I think giving every council member the opportunity to then have some input on that is important, not only for the sake of the contract, but also I think in the way that we're able to evaluate how the city actually, on our end, not just negotiates, but also handles the performance of those contracts and so forth. So we're able to then evaluate not just the contract, but the staff as well that kind of helped us through that process. So that's just from my perspective. I think it is important to have that discussion. I maybe don't have all of my thoughts as well formed as I would like for tonight, but at least to get the discussion on the table, I think would be beneficial.
So, I mean, from a direction standpoint, I guess what would staff's next step be? Because, some of us, or it seems like at least 4 of us are saying that, a 10-year contract is, no offense, but I mean, it's not a move that we want to see made again. And with the city changing, when this contract was first voted in, like Councilmember Hernandez just said, I mean, the city was half its size. I mean, things have changed considerably since then. So, well, I guess what would be the next move?
So, we need to have a policy change, and attached is that section 2.18 for renewals. We could draft an expansion and clarification of that, and then also if it affects the comprehensive financial management policy statements are also there, because that's how we operate. I mean, we'll follow those, but so we can come to you with some suggestions based on what we heard here and bring that to you for consideration and go from there.
Quick comment.
I would just offer a suggestion is what we could do policy-wise is we could limit contract lengths to 3 years unless there's a supermajority of council to approve a longer term.
I think there's some contractors you got to kind of realize what they contribute to your organization. For instance, just take for example, financial advisor, bond counsel, and audit services. Those are very important contracts that we have. A lot of I know I belong to some organization where every 3 years they change them out. Kind of like having your family doctor. The doctor after a while knows all about you, know what your problems are, and how to address them. And I think when we look at our finances, we need somebody in the financial advisory that knows us real well, know what we're doing, what our plans are, where we're heading, what our weakness and strengths are, and can make the right decision. And as an advisor, also same with bond counsel, and I'm just picking these out, audit services. They've proven that they know us, they work well with us. And if we start messing up, of course, you change out after a while. But I think that that doesn't apply to every one of them. I'd be a little concerned about the electric service contract here that we listed here in this thing. But I think it depends on what type of contract we're working with. And there's some of them that I think just even though they've done a fabulous job, there's no sense changing them out every 3 years. Every 7 years or whatever the agreed term limit for them, automatic. I know Houston Gulf Area Council has the same policy where they have changed out certain of their contractors just automatically because we said we'd do it every 5 years or something like that. And I think the one we got in as a result, we had to struggle and work with them pretty hard. to get the job done correctly. And I think that's something we've experienced over the years. We had this term of 5 years on certain contractors. You're out. We'll go get somebody else. Well, then it took a long while to get them back in shape and train them to the point. And so I think I don't have a big problem with the contract we have. For instance, finance, we'd have a 7-year term, then we had some extensions, and the same way with some of the others. So I thought, unless they're making some disastrous decisions for us that is reflected in impacting the city and its growth and its finances, I think if you got somebody that's working well and you like them and they're part of the team, I don't have any problem extending the contract.
Well, Mayor, with all due respect, I mean, each one of us has to work hard to run again if we want to get reelected every 3 years. And so, I'm not saying that we don't get reelected. Every, person that's up here for a second term, or even Councilmember Owens, yourself, has been elected, several times when given the opportunity. I guess my whole thing was, and those that supported putting this on the agenda was just that they need to come back up to us every so often, and their term shouldn't outlast. They shouldn't have the benefit of not having to have their contract renewed, just as we as council members have to have, our terms renewed. They're making money off of us. They're providing a benefit, but I mean, you never know, what could happen inside of that 3 years. I'm not saying that we should change who we're putting in place, but it needs to come back up, and things need to be, maybe a new RFP, make them, have to come back and present new options to keep our pricing good. They need to stay fair. Every business operates like that. I mean, they need to stay competitive. Not every 7 years. Our marketing contract with the marketing folks for our firm is, every 6 months. And I'm sure the other business owners up here have different vendor contracts. Nothing that's, as long as, 7 years or 10 years. And so, that was my only.
I think it's a good point. I wasn't suggesting that we not have reviewed them at intervals of time. And we've done this on several of them. And we've said they've done such a good job. They're still working well with us, so we'll extend them another short contract. And I think the system we've got now is working pretty well.
And I would say that, a 3-year contract or a 4-year contract with, several options to extend or renew, honestly, I think it puts kind of the onus on the provider to meet milestones and to show us that they're doing a good job. And I mean, if we have a contract with a provider and that provider is doing a good job, I don't see a reason why. I mean, it just wouldn't make sense for us not to extend it. But again, it would give us the opportunity to renew it, and I think it would kind of light a little fire under the feet of whoever's providing that service to make sure that they're doing a good job, because they know they're going to have to come back before council every 3-4 years, whatever that term is that we decide. But I've always thought that, at least how I've run my business and how I contract with my vendors and so forth, I mean, it's important that they know that their performance level is important to me, and that I will, obviously have the opportunity to review that, whatever the term is, if it's electricity or I guess we don't have a choice for garbage, but, whatever, if it's a vendor for this or that, it kind of helps to push them in a good performance direction, if you will.
So Mayor and Council, if you don't mind, I think we got a flavor, and we could come back with a red line strikeout of the policies I referenced and let you all chew about that again. So, but we'll give you something more substantive to work from. I mean, this was just the introduction, so.
And Mr. Pearson, if I may, there are a couple of contracts that we need to provide you with some additional information. For example, the electricity. We locked in that rate for a specific amount of time, which allowed us to reduce our rate from the very beginning basically cut it in half. And then we're going to have another opportunity to do a similar type agreement regarding electricity. We kind of have the framework, what you'd like. We'll bring this back to you, but we need to give you some examples of areas where it may not be the best idea to include that 5-year term or 3.5 or whatever it may be.
And I know that I emailed Clay about this, but just to say thank you, at least for what we did receive on the agenda, the packet that we got. I mean, the level of detail was phenomenal, and it gave me a lot of information that maybe well, maybe is not the right word. It's definitely did not know. So thank y'all for the level of attention that you provided to the detail and so forth.
Any other comment from council on this? I think that's a good subject. I think we probably all follow Councilmember Reed's idea of maybe reviewing certain areas in our city where we need to talk about them a little bit more in little sessions like this. So I think this is good. Another business, we have one item, which is item 10. It says adjourn. So I'm going to execute that with a great deal of enthusiasm. We are adjourned.